Councillors, we'll commence meeting. Welcome to the ordinary council meeting of Wyndham City Council on Tuesday, 5th December 2017. In the spirit of reconciliation, before we begin this meeting, I acknowledge the peoples of the Kulin Nation as the traditional owners of the land on which Wyndham is being built, and we pay our respects to their elders, both past and present, and in the chamber tonight. If you could please stand for the opening prayer and welcome. We pray for guidance in the Council's decision making to achieve the best outcome for the people of Wyndham. Please be seated. I would like to welcome members of the gallery, press, councillors and staff here tonight for the ordinary council meeting. Some of you may have seen the notices in the foyer, but just to provide further information, but for those of you who didn't as well, I'd like to make you aware of the following. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the internet. The recording will be archived and made available on Council's website. Whilst all care has been taken to ensure that your privacy is maintained, please be aware that your presence may be recorded. Councillors, item 2 on the agenda is apologies and request for leave. Madam CEO, do we have any apologies or requests for leave?
Mr Mayor, we do have one apology this evening from Councillor John Gibbons, who was unable to attend this evening's council meeting. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank
you, Madam CEO. Councillors, there be no further apologies or requests for leave. Can I have someone move this, please? Councillor Mintaj Khan, seconder Councillor McElhaney. No discussion? All those in favour? Against? Councillor Marcus?
No, I had my hand up.
Sorry, I didn't catch. Okay, thank you. The motion is carried. Item 3, declaration by councillors of disclosure of interest, disclosure of conflict of interest, conflicting personal interest in any item on the agenda. Councillors, does anyone have any conflicts of interest that they wish to flag in relation to tonight's agenda? Councillor McElhaney?
Yes, I have a confidential, an item in confidential business, of which I will be leaving the chamber.
Thank you, Councillor McElhaney. Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I have a conflict of interest on 6.4.2, which is rezoning land on Princess Highway.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Councillor Marcus.
I have a conflict of interest in an item in the confidential agenda, and I will be leaving the council chamber.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus. Councillors, item 4 on the agenda is confirmation of minutes of previous meeting. The motion is that the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held on Wednesday 8th November 2017 as prepared and circulated be confirmed, and the special statutory meeting held on Wednesday 22nd November 2017 as prepared and circulated be confirmed. Councillors, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Khan, seconder, please. Councillor Villanzalo. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. Item 5 on the agenda is deputations and presentations. We have nil. Item 6 6, officers' reports. 6.1.1 is petition, request for permanent long-stay car park and other parking arrangements in Williams Landing. The report is on pages 9 to 10. The recommendation is on page 10 and there are no attachments. Councillors, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Khan. Seconder, Councillor McElhaney. Councillors, discussion?
Mr Mayor, this is only for noting the motion, so
Correct.
thank you.
No discussion, councillors? I put the motion. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. Item 6.1.2, petition. Proposed car parking arrangements at Princess and Queen's Court, Werribee. The report commences on page 11. The recommendation is on page 11. There are nil attachments. Councillors, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Marcus. Seconder. Councillor McElhaney. Discussion, councillors? There being no discussion, all those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. 6.1.3 petition response to petition in Linmax Court permit parking. The report is on page 12 to 15. Recommendations on page 12. Nil attachments. Councillors, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Khan. Seconder, please. Councillor McElhaney. Discussion, councillors? No discussion. Councillor McElhaney.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll be supporting the officer's recommendation after reviewing the best options. It's not simply just to place business parking in any area. It's difficult to enforce the administrative burden and sets a precedent for various other forms of parking, business permit parking. I'm not sure we want to open this up to industrial precincts. While I have empathy for the business owners, the option outlined appears to be the most suitable for this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McElhaney. Councillors, is there any speakers against this motion? Any further speakers for this motion? Nil? Okay, councillors, I then put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. (6.2.1) Reconciliation Action Plan. The report commences on page 16 to 19. Recommendation on page 16. The attachments are printed in a separate document, pages 3 to 48. Councillors, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Barlow. Seconder, please. Councillor Hooper. Councillor Barlow, you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. The first thing I'd like to do is actually announce that the council has actually won an award for this report, and I think that's a great achievement. In fact, the Wyndham's Reconciliation Action Plan has been in the process now for over 2 years. And I would specifically, before I go into it in great detail, I would like to thank obviously the committee that's worked diligently on this plan. I came into and onto this committee when I came back onto council late last year, and then I co-chaired it with Tricia Williams, who's in the chamber tonight, and I appreciate the assistance and the help that Tricia's put in. Of course, there are a number of people that are on the committee, and I won't mention them all because there were some that I don't think I actually met when I went onto the committee, because, as I say, it's been going for 2 years. I think previous councillor Bob Fairclough co-chaired the committee at that stage, and it is a wonderful plan, and it's going on. And if you just bear with me, I want to make sure that I get all my details right. The idea is now that this will go to Reconciliation Australia for them to actually rubber stamp, or I would hope stamp, that this action plan get accepted. And apart from the committee, who I think have done a sterling job over the last 2 years, I'd like to actually thank the staff of the Wyndham City Council, who have all, every one of them that's worked on this committee, have worked very hard and very diligently to bring it to the fruition that it's in. And I just want to mention, there's only 4 bullet points that I'd like to go into, and I'm just going to get across them now, that the community engagement has been very, very positive. The items that I want to stress specifically are that the establishment of the Wyndham Reconciliation Advisory Committee was back in 2016. The Council commissioned a possum skin cloak making project in 2016, and that was a great success. We've had extensive consultation with and input from staff across Council and contributions from community stakeholders. And of course, we've had specific consultation sessions in 2016-17 with each of the traditional owner organisations that has an interest in the lands and the cultural heritage of Wyndham. Really, I can only say that it's been an absolute pleasure to work with the community to bring this plan to fruition, and I'm sure that Reconciliation Australia will also see the merits of it, and I look forward to go on with the future actions that actually come out of the report. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Barlow. Councillors, are there any speakers against this motion? Any further speakers for it? No further speakers. I put the motion. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. 6.2.2 Indian Cultural Precinct Feasibility Study Outcomes. The report commences, or the report is on pages 20 to 25. Recommendations on page 20. Attachments are printed in a separate document, pages 49 to 82. Councillors, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Hooper. A seconder, please. Councillor Khan.
I've got a specific wording I'd like to move. And that
Councillor Hooper, are you moving amendment to the motion?
Well, I'm moving a motion.
No, there's a recommendation before the chamber. Are you moving an amendment to that recommendation? Thank you.
Council note that attached Indian Cultural Precinct Feasibility Study report and the recommendations as a reflection of the outcomes of the community consultation. And point 2, the Mayor write to the Minister of Multicultural Affairs requesting consideration of the report by the State Government and further discussions with Council following this consideration.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Councillor Khan, given that I already accepted your nomination, do you accept that amendment?
Mr. Mayor, accept an amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hooper, discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The first thing that stood out for me when chairing this committee is the fact that over 700 people with an interest in this issue were consulted as part of this feasibility study. I'd like to acknowledge all the people who took the time out of their busy lives to engage with Council. I'd also like to acknowledge our staff who have overseen this work, in particular Alicia Hughes. Your dedication and drive is awesome, and I don't use that word lightly. This level of community consultation gives me absolute confidence in supporting the recommendation tonight, Mr. Mayor. I'm confident that with the conclusion reached in the report by ACIL, that the most feasible option moving forward is a multicultural sculpture and performing arts park within our existing President's Park. I believe that this option best meets the criteria developed during the study and community consultation, namely financial viability and affordability, feasibility, authenticity and inclusiveness. And it's this last criteria, Mr. Mayor, that I want to reflect on further. While I sat on that project advisory committee alongside Councillor Barlow, 5 community members, our Director of City Life and the state government representatives, I always had an open mind about what would be the most inclusive option that would be in the interests of the whole Wyndham community. I believe by supporting this option tonight, we're achieving both goals. Finally, Mr. Mayor, I note that the issue of any financial contribution by council communities of interest in the state government are not subject to tonight's motion. These issues will need to be considered as a next step forward, following feedback from the state government. After it's considered the report, we will send them. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Councillors, is there any speaker against this motion? Any further speakers for it? Councillor Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to support Councillor Hooper. I did have a chair at the committee because of my role as the Cultural Diversity Portfolio holder. And let me suggest that in all my years on council, I very rarely have come across such an extensive consultation period in anything that I've been involved in. In fact, the $50,000 that was given to us by the state government to run the consultation process not only included local people on the committee, but it also included 2 consultancy companies, one of who worked diligently and on the Dandenong Indian precinct. So he came along on behalf of his organisation and provided a lot of expertise on the setup of that feasibility study and then the eventual going ahead of that precinct. I must admit that apart from 700 plus people who actually took the time out to respond, and the people who came to the 3 forums that we ran, and we ran them over a period of time, including during the week and on a Saturday as well, there was a good representation. And I can only say, as I said before, this has been one of the best consultation that I've seen. And if anybody didn't actually get to have a say, it's that they either don't read the papers, they don't look at the community pages on our website, because there was plenty of time for people and plenty of opportunity for people to actually make comment. However, at the end of the day, we've come up with a...
Barlow, you have 1 minute left.
Thank you. At the end of the day, as Councillor Hooper said, there is a recommendation, an option in there, and it may not have received 100% support by everybody, but out of all of the different areas that were looked at, it seemed to be the most feasible. So I commend the report.
Thank you, Councillor Barlow. Councillor, is there any further discussion? Councillor Gilligan.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. I also too support the amended motion because it very much relates to the importance of having a further conversation with the Minister for Multicultural Affairs about where we go in relation to this project. And if you consider the media release that was provided by the Victorian Government, they are intending to provide up to $500,000 to essentially create an Indian cultural precinct here in the city of Wyndham. And there are obviously serious questions about whether that would be enough to be able to create a precinct in this city. The Minister is about to appoint 22 members to a South Asian advisory group, and I hope that the Minister makes this the #1 priority for that advisory group heading into the next election. When you consider the context of the Indian community, and indeed consider the amount of Indians within the city of Wyndham, they are the 3rd largest ancestry here in the city of Wyndham, but most importantly, I believe, Tarneet has the highest density of Indian members in our community in Wyndham. And I believe that one of the other recommendations in this report does consider whether or not the Tarneet Community Learning Centre could be seen as a viable option for a precinct. In my view, whilst that consideration is in that report, it also largely depends on the amount that the Victorian Government is going to provide, because that in and of itself changes the location in relation to where this precinct could be built. It could be bigger and better than Dandenong, or it could be smaller and less exciting than Dandenong. But what I will say is there is no doubt that this council has consulted far more widely than what occurred in the Dandenong project, and I'm very interested to hear the Minister's response in relation to that.
You have 1 minute, Councillor.
Finally, I guess reiterating the points I have made, I think the Minister does need to give strong consideration about where this goes in our city, and whether or not Council, as part of a further discussion of investment, considers a financial contribution or a co-contribution with the Victorian Government. But I do hold the view that whilst there is a recommendation for the President's Park location, I do not believe that rules out the Tarneet location either, depending on what the Minister does in relation to committing funding on the table, which he clearly has not, and he needs to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gilligan. Councillors, any further discussion? Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This is very close to my heart because we started this project last year, and state government promised in 2014 allocation of the $500,000 for that, and we fought really hard in the last term because there was 3 destinations, Garradandirong, Melbourne and Wyndham, and we won as a Wyndham. We're very happy to see that, this is one of the passionate projects, and I've really now been pleased with the outcome of the report because that consultation, the feasibility report, have engaged a number of people, just not from the Indian background, but also the diverse background, and result of that, 700 people have participated in the survey. Now, it's very interesting to see that Wyndham City councils have now 27,000 people in Wyndham. That's about 5 to 10%, and that between 2011 and 16, the population is growing. Now, I totally agree with my colleague's comment on that, the commitment was a political commitment, and now we're looking forward to see that, after when we submit the report to the Minister of Multicultural Affairs, Robin Scott's office, how can we receive funding? And some of the community concern is $500,000 not enough. What can you do in $500,000? I don't think so. You can buy a 1 acre block in Wyndham in $500,000, and they put forward in an awkward situation where $500,000 they're trying to create Indian culture present. Now, this is a feasibility report. Will go for them. Now, the report have outlined the only recommendation option, which is Councillor Josh Gilligan have said that, the peasant park, it could be one option, but I also disagree with that option. I believe the reflection of the Indian community is a viable option, and it's my view, and I'm not speaking as the report, but in my view, that Tarnit is a true reflection of the Indian culture.
You have 1 minute, Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And that could be considered an option since this report has not been finalised. But saying that, think is a good work done by Chair, and especially with Tony Hooper and also the Henry Barlow, to make sure that the report has been done properly, and recommendations and clear messages given to the Labor government and the Minister. We need money. Without money, this is not going to work. So we're really looking forward to see how they can quickly release the funds and make sure we get the money on time. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Councillors, any further discussion? Councillor McAloney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The consultation was wide, the feedback and the outcomes from the community was diverse, and the report correctly reflects the recommendations of the community consultation undertaken. Consultation took place in 3 phases: the community surveys, the focus groups, and the deliberation by the Project Advisory Committee. The preferred option from the outcome of this report, and with the consultation with the Project Advisory Group, was that option 3, the multicultural, sculpture and performing arts park, was the preferred option. The suggested option supports the multicultural policy and action plan and promotes the multiculturalism in our community. At this point, the Council has not made a commitment for co-contribution, and my understanding is the $500,000 is now not based on any contribution by Council. As suggested on page 24, a well-planned and executed project could be an opportunity to support strongly held views of the Wyndham community around inclusion, culture, arts and heritage. I asked one thing that I want to see is that a poorly planned and executed project that could contribute to social diversion and exclusion doesn't happen. I would like to thank Councillor Hooper and Councillor Barlow for the work and their respective portfolios on this project, because there's been a lot of work and a lot of consultation being undertaken. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McAloney. Councillors, any further discussion? There being no further discussion, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. 6.3, item 6.3.1, response to Victorian Auditor General Office, Victorian Auditor General Office report of planning for growth. The report is on page 26 to 31, with a recommendation on page 27. Attachments at page 32 to 35. Councillors, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Shaw. Councillor McAloney, seconder. Councillor Shaw, discussion?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'm just going to apologise for my bad case of laryngitis.
Sorry.
so hopefully I'll be brief, possibly not. I'm pleased to support the motion before us tonight. As Council's family-friendly city portfolio holder, most people in this room will know about my passion for kindergartens as well as the full range of our maternal child health services. I'm also a strong advocate for adequate funding. Funding supports both the actual service levels as well as the bricks and mortar infrastructure needed to support these services. But it's not always about funding, Mr Mayor. It's also about better planning and collaboration. This is the major contribution I think this Auditor General's audit report makes. Unsurprisingly, the audit report is a bit of a mixed bag. On the one hand, it states that adequate planning is hindered by the lack of a requirement for the Department of Health and Human Services, responsible for public health services, and the Department of Education and Training, responsible for planning for maternal child health services, kindergartens and schools, to integrate precinct structure planning proposals into their own planning and delivery. And yet, on the other, it outlines existing good practice case studies like the Northern Growth Corridor Service Plan, which is much more focused on future needs. Mr Mayor, I was also pleased to see the audit report recommend the Department of Education work with us to improve accuracy of data and to focus on improving access to services for vulnerable children. As the audit report notes, this is critically important given Wyndham has the highest number of vulnerable on 2 or more Australian early development census domains in Australia. Maternal child health workforce pressures and concerns are also discussed in the report, as is the need for the state government to take a more tailored and active approach to the provision of infrastructure in growth areas. These last few issues are why it's important to focus on funding of kindergartens, as we've been doing through our I Love Kinder campaign, but also on service levels, focus and bricks and mortar infrastructure. Mr Mayor, it might seem like I'm concentrating on the negatives here. This is probably because the very nature of audit reports from all Auditor Generals around the country highlight problems and areas for improvement. But to be honest, the very existence of this audit report and our proposed responses to it moves us all in a forward direction. And this, Mr Mayor, is what leaves me with a sense of optimism as the family-friendly city portfolio holder, which is why I am supporting the motion tonight. But before I finish, I want to say thank you to the staff who have made what can seem like a very complex issue quite easy to read and understand. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Councillors, are there any speakers against this motion? Any further discussion for the motion? Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think I'll just go brief on issues. This report have highlighted very important issues that the audit found a lack of accountability and integration of the planning effort across the Victorian government departments' responsibilities, and identified that there is no single agency responsible for ensuring the services and infrastructure and delivering the early in the life of the communities, despite there being a stated goals and range of the relevant planning, policy and legislation. This audit also have highlighted the emerging good practices and opportunities for that identify the areas for the council to work together with the Victorian government. And my fellow councillor, Mia Shaw, have touched base on the problems in kindergarten and health department and education departments now. These are the issues we really need to work with the state government, and coordination is required. So I look forward to see that, how we can improve the services and take responsibility in future and adopt the good practices in relations to meeting the services and infrastructure to the community. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Councillors, Councillor McElhaney.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This is an important report and one that I hope continues to receive public attention and a focused plan of attack by this and future state governments. It is a report that needed to be written. Without going into too much detail, I think the summary of the report says it all. That it is structural failings in the state government's approach to growth area planning stems from the fact that no single agency is responsible for services and infrastructure to be delivered early in the life of new communities, despite the relevant planning, policy and legislation requiring this. This is something Wyndham has been saying for successive council's terms, Mr Mayor. But it need not be doom and gloom, and I would recommend people look at the areas where better collaboration needs to be explored. In particular, I note we are keen for there to be locality planning approach, as has been rolled out in the North Growth Corridor Service Plan by the Department of Health and Human Services. The potential impacts on our kindergartens and other early years services is just too important to ignore. We have recently seen the consequences of kinder infrastructure not keeping pace right on our back door. I applaud the Auditor-General's Andrew Reeves' recommendation that the Department of Planning work with Victorian Planning Authority, that is the VPA, and the Department of Human Services to monitor the effectiveness of precinct structure planning processes for health precincts. Given Wyndham's long-standing advocacy to ensure more services and infrastructure are delivered early, we should also note the Auditor's recommendations to develop guidelines that clarify the concept of timely provision of services and infrastructure for new communities. Timely. You can't have 1.5 million residents move into Victoria without some foresight, coordination and planning and clarity as to the timing. Finally, Mr Mayor, I'd like to thank our dedicated staff for bringing this report and the Auditor-General's audit to our attention once again. We have a team that when I'm with the state government, and senior advisors come up to us, they always say that Wyndham Council provides quality evidence-based information and that they welcome our reports because we come up with solutions as well. I highly recommend a read of the brief on page 3, the proposed response to the audit that Wyndham Council will be circulating far and wide. This will be part of our ongoing advocacy to ensure communities receive services and infrastructure they need when they need it, and not rather placing blame. We want to work as a constructive part of finding solutions with the state government. So thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McElhaney. Noted by 7 seconds. Councillors, any further discussion? Councillor Gilligan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just wanted to say absolutely nailed it, the staff. I remember sitting on a bus with Georgie Hill and the Director of City Life, Jimmy McMahon, having a pretty long conversation about this issue. And indeed, it is great to see the level of detail in relation to our response to this issue. It is so clear that in the case of the City of Wyndham, we have the strategic capabilities to work with the Victorian Government to deliver a pipeline strategy on infrastructure in relation to early childhood years to even schools. If you take into account a great example of the policy failures departmentally, in terms of the state government that is, where we're looking upwards of 50% of schools in some of these new PSPs being Catholic as opposed to government schools, well above the average that is normally expected. Now, again, the diversity of schools, the diversity in the pipeline of the investment, a great example of policy failure, but highlighted very clearly by the Auditor-General in relation to this report. So I commend the staff. I think we've absolutely nailed this. I think we have to, I agree with Councillor McElhaney and very much agree with Councillor Shaw on the comments you've made as well, and of course Councillor Khan, that we really do need to drive this publicly. We are one of the few municipalities that have clearly shown that we get it and are delivering this, and it makes it very difficult departmentally for the state government to say that you're wrong, because we're absolutely right on this one. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gillian. Councillors, any further discussion? Councillor Hooper.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd also like to thank the staff for presenting this report through the chamber and also including the proposed response that forms the basis of the ongoing discussions with the state government. I think this makes both the Auditor-General's report and our response far more accessible to our community. I hope we follow this approach in future reports too. I'd also like to comment tonight about the obvious lack of a clear link between land use planning and the adequate delivery of critical early life services and infrastructure, as previously mentioned. As my other colleagues would agree, this issue has real impacts for people living here in Wyndham. I therefore welcome the recommendations in the Auditor-General's report, as they represent a bit of a roadmap we can use to look back and judge future actions. Mr Mayor, I'm very happy that one of the major land use planning tools, precinct structure plans. So I say that in respect to this report, not about the things themselves. And the process for developing and adopting them has been a key focus of this report. I believe that recommendations are a bit brave and set a challenge for all governments to ensure that future PSPs involve key departments such as the Department of Health and Human Services, Education and Training and Environment, Land, Water and Planning in PSP planning, like it's planning. One other recommendation stands out as one we should all watch in the future, and this is to implement the Plan Melbourne 2017-2050 action to prepare sequencing strategy for precinct structure plans in growth areas for the orderly and coordinated release of land and the alignment of infrastructure plans to deliver basic community facilities within these staged land release plans. This, Mr Mayor, has been the long-standing view of the Council, and I'm sure I and many others will watch keenly and support the VPA to meet this goal. Thank you. Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I commend this motion to the councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Councillors, any further discussion? Councillor Barlow.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Well spoken by all the councillors, but let me take this up to another level, at a much higher level. All the Auditor General has done, the Victorian Auditor General has done in his report, is actually supported the work that's been done over a number of years, but it's actually been done now by a high-level government department. Back in 2004, 10 councils that ring Melbourne got together and formed the Interface Council Group. And going back a couple of months ago, the Interface Council had what was called the Interface Council meetings, and they met with ministers and with shadow ministers. And one of the key principles of these meetings was to actually talk about the fact that we were looking for a high-level interdepartmental committee that brought together the key heads, not the bureaucrats, but the key heads, whether they be the departmental secretaries or the departmental directors, along with representatives from each of the ministerial offices at a high-level meeting that actually discussed the issues of the councils that are picking up the growth areas around Victoria. Now, this has been on the books for a number of years. I think that the livability study as created by the Interface Councils tells a lot about this. And now what's happened is finally somebody at a high level in state government, such as the Victorian Auditor General, has actually come out to support what we've been pushing for a number of years. This is not new. We've been doing this for a number of years. Let me take you to the next level, at a federal level. The NAGO, which is the National Growth Areas Alliance, have also, who are representing about 20 heavy, large growth councils around Australia, have been to Canberra. We were there in August.
1 minute, Councillor Barlow.
And we actually also spoke at the federal level with ministers and with shadow ministers to also federally to set up an interdepartmental committee along the same lines as what our suggestion is for Victoria, to allow us to be able to support and provide the necessary funding and services to organisations or to councils, growth councils, Australia-wide. So, as I said before, this is nothing new. What happens is we finally have got a heavyweight on our side. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Barlow. Councillors, any further discussion? No further discussion. I put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. Item 6.3.2, State and Federal Pre-Budget Submissions. Report is page 36 to 37 with a recommendation on page 36. The attachments, page 38 to 53. Councillors, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Khan, seconder, Councillor McElhaney. Councillor Khan, you wish to speak to the motion?
Yes, Mr Mayor. Look, it's great to see that, the pre-submission have been asked now. The federal government is a deadline is for Friday, the 15th of December 2017 and this is a pre-budget submission for the federal and the state government. The state government will be the mid-January 2018 for submissions, but of course, you can start preparing. I'm very pleased to see that, the Wyndham City Council officers and all staff, those involved in this preparing submissions, have done a great job. Now, look at the pages. I won't go in all details because it's kind of wish list now. They've got a lot of good things, and I wish all can get approved, and that'll be great for the Wyndham City. Now, I'm very pleased to see that in relations to this submission talks about transport, talks about environment, talks about schools. Just quickly touch base on a school, what we're demanding, which is an 18-19 state budget, and we'll put down the list of the priority, which is a Trogonina, the primary school, which is S9004 Sports Reserve, Trogonina PSP. We're also requesting Tarnit, Messian House Primary, and so forth. List goes on, and especially in Williams Landing Primary School, which is there is currently no land, but we were requesting. So this is a kind of wish list we have submitted to the state government, and I hope so the state government will look this document, take it seriously, and listen to us what we're demanding. This important document. I'm pleased to see that officers have spent a lot of time, and it's got a lot of projects. So the reports will talk about. We look forward to also the people can make their submissions to the Victorian government and demand, because I don't think so we can do enough. We need all of you to submit your submission to state government, and the website have a link. So I think you all have the right to your local MPs and federal MPs. And of course, these are great documents to see that what we're demanding and that it can be achieved. Otherwise, we need all your support. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Councillor, are there any speakers against this motion? Any further speakers for it? Councillor Marcus.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think they're excellent budgets that's been prepared by our council officers, because as we all know, we have a very fast-growing city. We're, I think, second on the list after Casey at the moment, and we've got very many challenges for this city in transport. So I think that's the most and the biggest bugbear of most of our people that are living in this city. Schools is another very, very important one. I know Manor Lakes, we're looking at thousands of children. I'm on the board out there, and this is a concern that this school is the biggest one already. So we just need to make sure that everything that is in these pre-budget submissions, that we can make sure that we can get our message through, because for the last 8 years we've been plugging away, and they haven't really listened. But I think with what we're putting into the budget submissions now is better material, and they should start to take notice. As you all know, I was absent from the last meeting. I had the opportunity to meet with some of the federal ministers, and we have been able to secure meetings with the Assistant Treasurer, who is the assistant to Scott Morrison, and to Mr. Alan Tudson, and Natalie's arranging those meetings, and they will be getting all of these budget submissions in this. I think this is a good way. We will, and I know that Henry's done a lot of work with the state ministers. So between us, hopefully, we can get to the ministers federally and to the state ministers and just tell them that we need money. And as one speaker said, make sure everyone out there, you get behind us and make sure that we have a very loud voice and say, enough is enough. You have to support us, or we have to stop the growth. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus. Councillors, any further discussion? Councillor McElhaney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I concur with my fellow councillors regarding the schools issue. It is a complex issue, and it's a difficult one to choose one over the other in the municipality. I would also like to take the opportunity to highlight a couple of items in the pre-budget submission, and that is the proposed Wyndham Justice Precinct. As a Safer Communities portfolio holder, part of the work plan and the city plan is to advocate for our Wyndham Justice Precinct. It's a long time coming. The proposed Justice Precinct seeks to co-locate justice services and a range of community services on a designated site in the East Werribee Employment Precinct. At the moment, I commend the state government. The police complex has been fully funded by the state government, and funds to help plan the development of the courts component has also been funded, and this work is currently being undertaken. It's my understanding that it would be the first justice precinct of its kind and scale in the outer growth area, breaking new ground and providing much needed services for the people of Wyndham and the surrounding areas, and indeed across the Western region. It is proposed that Justice Precinct would comprise of a new multidisciplinary court complex with a range of courts and court support services for both civil and criminal matters, a new police complex of significant size and scope, and an integrated support service hub. It is really important that this project goes ahead. The success relies on the funding and the development of all its components as one. The Integrated Support Service Hub currently does not have the funding commitment, and funds to support the capital development of this court complex following its planning phase are also yet to be confirmed. I strongly advocate to the state government to fully fund this. It is a critical piece of infrastructure. The second item I'd just like to bring up is Avalon Airport. We must support the plans to get an international airport here. I can't emphasise enough the importance of this, the jobs and the possible tourism. There'll be huge economic benefits to this community. We will, at one stage early this year, I was with the Premier and Cotton On Group were turning the sod, and they hope to open by mid-2018. They forecast to have 300,000 products being processed in that area a day. We are, our neighbouring councils should be also getting behind and supporting this. There is a new 40-hectare industrial precinct with immediate access to travel and freight, offers an absolute great opportunity and one that we just can't ignore. So I hope that also goes ahead.
Thank you, Councillor McElhaney. Councillors, any further? Councillor Gilligan.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. And touching on Councillor McElhaney's point, which I think is a very good one, is looking at, particularly in the Australian government submission, what investments are coming from the federal infrastructure budget here, not just in our city, but in the Geelong region. And it is important to point out the investment required for Avalon Airport and turning that into an international airport. But let's also consider the context of what we've been given in this financial year from the federal government. And in my view, the Victorian government has well and truly delivered billions of dollars either this financial year in the forward estimates for our city. But what has the federal government delivered in terms of the investment, road and rail? And when you go and have a look at the program that the federal government have outlined, and you look at Western Sydney, Brisbane, getting significant quantums of funding, hundreds of millions of dollars to be precise. They're growing at a rate of knots. We are growing at very similar rates. We've been given $200,000. That is it. $200,000 as these similar regions are getting hundreds of millions of dollars. There is a legitimate point to be made about making sure that we do get our fair share of federal funding for infrastructure, particularly when you consider the importance of the airport infrastructure to our rail infrastructure. If you take the ABC report that was released roughly 6 hours ago that talked about the significant quoting at cattle trucks that exist on the Geelong line, where we've got literally people squeezing into our train lines, that requires federal investment immediately. And all we've been given is $200K. So this report, in terms of the submission for the Australian government submission, is critical, and I commend the work that's been done. And hopefully we get a little bit more than $200,000 by May next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gilligan. Councillors, any further discussion? Councillor Hooper.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm just going to keep it short and brief. Look, a great man once said we can't be stuck in the past, that we can't be doing things from the 1950s. We need to look to the future. We need to look to the needs of our kids and their kids and so on. And this report has something in it which is a bit of a soul of the community and close to my heart that I absolutely love seeing included, and that's a regional art gallery. The submission is in there, it's meaningful, it's something that we've been missing as a community for quite some time, a place that we can actually go to and celebrate who we are and the people that have made our place the great place that it is. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Councillors, any further discussion? No further discussion. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. Item 6.3.2, Community Engagement Framework Draft. The report is on page 54 to 56, recommendations on page 54 and attachments on page 57 to 77. Councillors, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Gilligan, seconder, please. Councillor McElhaney. Discussion, Councillor Gilligan?
Yes, I'll be very brief. This document, in my view, is quite a comprehensive framework to enable us to have a broad spectrum of tools to communicate and engage with the community. I'm sure there are other matters tonight that the community would love to continue to engage with, as I'm sure we'll see later, which is a great example of the framework that we are voting on tonight. And indeed, when we consider the applications for the future on things such as why the Essential Services Commission needs to consider a growth rate, it is a great example of the level of work that will be done in engaging with community and bringing them with us. Whether it's an online platform, and we've seen that in the case of Maribyrnong Council and indeed in Hobson's Bay, where they're transforming the way in which they engage with community. A two-way dialogue on the online sphere, that capacity for residents to not just go through the conventional means of engaging on strategy, but even raising issues, indeed policy ideas in an online environment. So this is what this framework does. It is, as I stated, comprehensive, significant work being done by our stakeholder team, and I look forward to seeing further community interest in relation to this framework, and I commend it tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gilligan. Councillor, is there anyone that wishes to speak against this motion? Any further discussion for it? Councillor McElhaney.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, this is an important document, and I'd like to acknowledge Natalie Walker and the team for the comprehensiveness of this report. Community engagement, as the report states, is the key to all we do and forms an integral part of the decision-making process. It is the framework of which we and the organisation engage with the public. Much work has been undertaken behind the scenes prior to this draft coming to Council for public exhibition. It's our opportunity to improve processes, and we certainly are open to new methods. It maximises the opportunity for the public to engage with the community. Often we get people saying we don't engage. Well, this is your opportunity. It offers opportunities to be flexible, and we offer online platforms to engage with the wider community. And I know that not all councillors engage in these different platforms. I look forward to hearing from the community and the opportunity for them to make comment on this draft. As I said, Mr Mayor, this is an extremely important document, and it's the basis of which we communicate with the public. So I hope we get some good responses. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McElhaney. Councillor, is there any further discussion? No further discussion. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried.
Call for a division, please, Mr Mayor.
Councillors, we have a division. All those who voted in favour, please indicate. Councillor Josh Gilligan, Councillor McElhaney, Councillor Wallaby Gonzalo, Councillor Henry Barlow, Councillor Peter Maynard, Councillor Mia Shaw, Councillor Heather Marcus, Councillor Aaron Arn, Councillor Tony Hooper, and Councillor Intaj Khan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillors, item 6.3.4, review of geographic naming policy. The report is on page 78 to 81 of the agenda. Recommendations on page 79, and the attachments are page 82 to 89. Councillors, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Intaj Khan, seconder, please. Councillor Barlow. Discussion, Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is straightforward, it's outlining the Act, how we can change the names and make sure we have registered for geographical names. So the report is quite comprehensive, explain itself what needs to be going in roads and what responsibility you have in putting the names into the register, what can be done under the Act, what can't be done. So it's pretty straightforward, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Councillors, are there any speakers against this motion? Any further speakers for it? No further speakers. I put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. Item 6.4, 6.4.1, Housing and Neighbourhood Character Strategy, Community Consultation Outcome. The report is on page 90 to 101 with a recommendation on page 92. Attachments are printed in a separate document at 83 to 153. Councillors, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Khan. The seconder? Councillor Hooper. Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I've been as a portfolio holder for Urban Futures, so this is pretty close to what I sort of do at along with offices. I will be supporting this report. Is an outcome. We started, the council have the meeting in 2015, 24th of August, and then a strategy was prepared to provide a framework implementation of this new residential zone introduced by state government into the Victorian planning provision on the June 2013. So what we did, Mr. Mayor, now this consultation's been out, and just summarising that now there's, as we know, that a lot of things happening. The strategy identified substantial changes, incremental changes areas, limited changes areas, substantial changes areas would allow that most intensive residential development apartments. The 4-story plus incremental changes areas also allow the modest developments, unit and townhouses 2 to 3 stories, and limited changes areas allow the minimal residential development. Look, report is quite comprehensive, so I won't go in much in detail, but it's important to note that there is when we do the planning, so there is a different types of the zoning, which is the residential growth zone, which is we call RZZ, would apply to the substantial changes areas. Now that has been changed and updated, the strategies come out with remove the residential growth zone and replace it with general residential zone. So that changes the significance when it's come down to the planning. So this entire document contains furthermore how people need to understand when they're applying for the planning permit. And it's an important document. I'm glad that, a lot of people have participated. About 250 people have done submissions to this. So I'm sure that, this strategy have affected a lot of people in some ways. So people, when applying for the planning, it's important to see that, why things get changed, when the things will go, as per the document, because the zoning have been, a bit of a change to what we used to be previously. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Councillors, is there any speakers against this motion? Any further speakers for it?
I'll just be brief.
Councillor Gilligan.
This policy really is about livability, and in my view, one of the greatest parts of this is making sure we've got higher density around our train stations. So yes, that is going up. I accept that for some that is obviously a stark thing, particularly in established suburbs in our city. But it's an inevitable reality as we see the population vastly increase. But it also shows the forward thinking of the way that we're planning in our city to make sure that people are close to public transport, to reduce congestion, to make that 20-minute city a viable prospect now and into the future. And indeed, this strategy, this comprehensive strategy, which has been, there has been a series of staff and significant consultation to get to this point. This will be a significant game changer. We hear that word used somewhat infrequently, but certainly when it is used, I think it sums up the level of change. And in this instance, this is a strategy that's worth commending and highlighting those points. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gillian. Councillors, is there any further discussion? No further discussion. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. Item 6.4.2, Planning Scheme Amendment C198, rezoning of...
Mr. Mayor, I would like to put forward an alternative motion.
Accept your alternative. I have a second. Councillor Shaw, Councillor Khan.
I have conflict of interest, so I will leave it.
I'll speak up.
Please continue, Councillor Shaw.
Mr Mayor, I'd like to put forward an alternative motion for item 6.4.2.
Please read that motion.
That council resolved to undertake the following: abandon amendment C198 to Wyndham Planning Scheme pursuant to section 28 of the Planning and Environment Act. Advise the Minister for Planning of the decision to abandon the amendment.
Councillors, I have a seconder for this motion. Councillor Gilligan. Councillor Shaw, used to speak to this motion.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll just make a few comments in relation to this. After careful consideration of the planning merits of this rezoning, I take the view that the amendment is not justified at this time and does not achieve orderly planning. The owner of the land at 303 to 319 Princess Highway approached council to undertake a review of the current zoning at this location. This is not unusual in itself, but I don't believe it is the right time to have this land rezoned to mixed use. As far as I am concerned, the only benefit in rezoning is for the owner at this stage, not council or the wider community. This land is on a very congested and busy intersection. We are having many issues with the Hoppers Crossing level crossing and the traffic congestion issues it is causing on a daily basis. We need to know what is happening with this level crossing before we make any decisions about rezoning, structure plans, etc. in this area. It needs further discussions with councillors and councillor officers on the options available to us, and changing this now may reduce these options and only compound an already congested intersection. I would like to finish by saying that council officers have followed all the correct processes, and this alternative motion has nothing to do with their standard of work. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Councillors, are there any speakers against this motion? Against?
I'm against,
Against?
Councillor Shaw's amendment.
Councillor Marcus.
This is one of the gateways to the City of Wyndham, and at the moment it's not a good look for the visitors and residents entering. I think the council officers have written a very good report, and I am in favour of their recommendations. So I'm against the amendments put up by Councillor Shaw. It is good to see that the heritage listing of the South Bay Stone is protected, and when the development occurs, I would like to see if the site could be open to more people. It is important to rezone the land from industrial 3 zone and residential zone schedule 1 to mixed use zones. If we abandon this proposal, what are the reasons for doing so? There have been no objections, and the proposal may lead to the development of health services and facilities needed by the Wyndham community, and abandoning this proposal would stop the development of the land for such purpose. As the land is developed, it will act as a transition to the uses of adjacent commercial, residential and urban growth zoned land. The existing uses are not expected to impact on the amenity of the residential development. The application of an environmental audit overlay is considered to be reasonable. I do not think that council can hold back on this mixed use zone and leave this development sitting on land that will not develop, and I don't believe it's a very good look for developers wanting to come in if the council can or do not go ahead and use this as a mixed use zone. Structure planning would logically include the Hoppers Crossing train station and any roadworks or redesign of the old Geelong rail line, as a rail crossing removal would have a significant impact on the layout of surrounding lands. It is thought prudent for council not to prepare a structure plan without including the ultimate design for any rail crossing removal design. At this stage, council have no current timelines for the crossing removal at this intersection, and it is not included in the current state government's top 50 crossing removal program. Given the new barriers surrounding the site to the north,
you have 1 minute.
I'll have to go quick, won't I? East and to the south, it is considered unlikely that the site can be easily or practically integrated with the surrounding land as part of a structure plan. Given all of these uncertainties, I am happy that council can determine to proceed with the amendment C198 as is currently proposed. Preparing a structure plan for the area before the state government has confirmed the timing and details of the crossing, and the council would be wasting their money, and I'm not in favour of the amendment put up. I'm in favour of the recommendation being put forward by the council officers.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus. Councillors, are there any speakers for this motion? Councillor Gilligan.
Yeah, Councillor Barlow. Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. Obviously, I made a very important point in relation to the last motion about the importance of higher density around train stations. And whilst I accept this particular site is close to a station, that is also the reason why I support Councillor Shaw's amendment. I think there is a significant importance to continue to work with the Victorian Government on an outlined timeline to remove that level crossing. And I believe that at that point, when we get to that point, that would then be the appropriate timeline for further pursuing this proposed amendment before us. I think that, as Councillor Shaw has outlined, there is issues that may arise in relation to increased congestion around that site, and indeed what impact that may have either to discourage or delay the government from removing that level crossing. It also gives and incentivises a situation whereby we could see the Victorian Government take an interest in making sure that they do deliver and bring forward the removal of that level crossing. And whilst I accept it's outside of the top 50, it also needs to be considered in the context of the impact of this particular application in relation to what would happen in the vicinity of that application, and indeed whether or not a structure plan is needed and is appropriate, and indeed what impact a level crossing would have. So for those reasons, I do support Councillor Shaw's amendment. Thank you,
Councillor Gillian. Councillors, are there any further speakers against this motion? Against? Against. Yes, Councillor McElhaney.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We've had 2 submissions, and both of those submissions have resulted. There's been no objections received to this rezoning proposal. This matter was deferred on the 1st of July 2017 in an ordinary council meeting, and a fuller consideration of the proposal has now been provided. Key physical barriers around the site has been identified. More information has been provided on a nearby heritage site, and it has been confirmed that the amendment does not seek to make any changes to the heritage site, which will remain accessible via a carriageway easement from the Princess Highway on the title 301 Princess Highway, which does not form part of the subject land. A structure plan has been considered and reasoning provided for why the preparation of the structure plan should only commence, and I say should only commence, after the state government has confirmed the timing and the details of the level crossing removal at Hoppers Crossing. If we abandon this proposal, what are the reasons for doing so? There has been no objections, and the proposal will potentially facilitate the development of land for medical facilities or other community facilities in the area. So I will not be supporting the alternate recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor McElhaney. Councillors, any further discussion for the amendment? Alternative, I should say. Councillor Barlow.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Strangely enough, I'm not against it becoming a mixed-use zone. I just think, and I know I've spoken to Councillor Shaw about this, I just think that we're a little ahead of ourselves just because the owner wants to seek an amendment, because I take on board about the fact that the Hoppers Crossing train station road rail interchange isn't on the books at the moment, but we've been advocating very, very strongly to add the Hoppers Crossing train station road rail interchange onto the contract that's going to be set for the rail going through the Werribee train station. And our argument with the state government is that it would be much cheaper to do that now instead of coming back in a couple of years' time or 4 years' time and doing the Hoppers Crossing station later on. The other thing that concerns me is that we've recently completed that intersection, and it's a bit of a spaghetti type of intersection. You've got 2 lanes of traffic coming into 1 lane that wants to turn left. You've got, you get held up by 3 sets of traffic lights plus a train line. And I think that longer term, that old area of Hoppers Crossing, the original roads of Powell Drive, 1st to 4th Avenue, Baden Drive, are prime in my view, and depending on our activity centre PSPs, prime for higher density development, close to shopping, close to services, close to the train station, and close to the bus intermodal. So therefore, I think if you go jumping ahead of ourselves, if the road rail interchange comes through and it's above ground, it's going to create a massive amount of space underneath that could be held on for a range of services or facilities, in whether it be car parking or whether it be commercial or retail or whatever happens along there. So maybe the mixed use zone may not be the ideal zoning for that area going into the future, because we're preempting. We assume automatically that it's going to be doctors, surgeries, etc., etc. I think the ideal thing would be, let's see where all this takes us with our advocacy and lobbying, and then we can decide to bring this back. Because at the moment, the area there serves a purpose, but I'm sure it's not going to stay like that into the future. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Barlow. Councillors, any speakers against this motion? Any further speakers at all?
I'd like a right to reply.
You will, Councillor Shaw. Councillor Shaw, you have a right to reply. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It was raised a couple of times that there were actually no objections to this. I just would like to point out that 10 parties were notified of the amendment, and these were predominantly businesses and government departments. No residents along the Princess Highway were informed about this amendment. The 10 businesses and government departments, I'm happy to call them out. I don't think I will, but I will just highlight where some of their postal addresses are actually at. One's Werribee, one's Williamstown, one's Albert Park, one is St Albans, one is in Melbourne, one is in Mitcham, another one is in Melbourne, another one is in Newport, another one is in Melbourne, and the last one was actually Vicks Rose, which is actually in Sunshine. So as far as I am concerned, actually no local residents were actually informed about this amendment or given the opportunity to actually object, which is also another reason why I have actually put forward this alternative motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Councillors, if you can indicate clearly, those in support of this motion, please raise your hand. 6. Those against? 3. The motion is carried.
Can I call for a division?
Call for a division, certainly. Councillors, all those who voted in favour: Councillor Gilligan, Councillor Barlow, Councillor Maynard, Councillor Shaw, Councillor Arnn, Councillor Hooper. I had to take a breath, sorry. And those against: Councillor McElhaney, Councillor Villar-Gonzalo and Councillor Marcus. Thank you, councillors. We can now have Councillor Khan into the chamber, please. So the next item on the agenda is 6.4.3 Planning Scheme Amendment C219 Kwandong Precinct Structure Plan. The report is on pages 118 to 132 with a recommendation on 119. There are attachments printed in a separate document, pages 154 to 257. Councillors, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Khan, seconder, please. Councillor Hooper. Councillor Khan, discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's great to see that now that finally Kwandong PSP is put forward for that planning, and it's good to see that the PSP is not large, it's very small PSP, and it's going to be residential PSP, but I wish if the PSP will get delivered on time, we would like to see that the PSP will have some kind of control, which is a bit of difficult. We know that we have to obey the planning scheme and zoning, but I like to see that, we have a larger block. So once the residential development kicks in, maybe 3 years time, 2 years time, whenever the PS will finally get approved for the VPA, we like to see the larger blocks and not in-house, which is small house, but under the Act they can do it. So this is a great piece of work council is starting, and its report comments today, and then community can put their feedbacks. But regarding this PSP, it's good to see that this PSP have a lot of reserve, and it's very close to the public transport and parks and schools. So that PSP itself hasn't got anything, but it's very close and very small PSP. This is a great piece of work. And once that's finished, then probably the other PSP, which is under draft, such as the Aviator PSP, whatever Junction PSP, the Oakbank PSP, other PSP can be then, once they get completed, can be, move forward after when that's finished. But good to see that PSP will...
Point of order, please, Mr. Mayor.
Voting point of order under what section?
Under clause 5B,
Which is?
that Councillor Khan is mentioning that the VPA will be doing the PSP. The VPA won't be doing the PSP. As it says in the recommendation, that council have been authorised by the VPA to actually do the PSP ourselves. And I stand to be corrected by the CEO or whatever, but this is one of the very, very few times that the VPA have actually handed over the authority for us to do the PSP. So it's just that it sounds like the VPA are actually running the show, but we're actually doing it ourselves.
You are correct, Councillor Barlow. We are actually the planning authority for this particular development. Councillor Khan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My implied meaning was that if you go on VPA's website, it will say the progress. So VPA is still the monitoring and the planning authority, even though we were given a work to commence, but it's still, I think, my understanding, the minister have to sign off once the work gets done finally.
We are the planning authority for this development.
Correct, yeah. So anyway, this PSP will have residential completely, will have a good residential blocks, and once the PSP get completed, and we now, is Henry Barlow, the councillor, have said that now the PSPs, it was doing the work, which is true. And that PSP will have about 1,600 dwellings. So that will be like a home to nearly, if I were not wrong, less than 3,000 people. So they can make the homes, and it is very close by with other facilities. But my implied meaning was in relation to the VPA did indicates where the PSP guideline is. If you go on VPA's website, it's still
Councillor, it doesn't matter what's online. We are the planning authority. So that's a done deal.
Yeah, that's correct, Mr. Mayor. Just an indication if people are interested, there's more information to find on VPA website. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Councillors, is there any speakers against this motion? Any further speakers for it? Councillor Hooper.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going to keep this brief. For years, I've been saying we need to take control of our own destiny. We have government departments planning in Melbourne what we're going to do. And we often get these PSPs which send a shiver down my spine like you wouldn't believe, where they talk about affordable housing, but that just creates more congestion on our roads, health issues when people are stuck in their cars and can't see their kids at night, all those sort of things that we can't control. This is the first step towards taking that control back. It might not seem like much, but we are setting the tone of this PSP. We're the ones that are actually developing it. We're the ones that are having a say. And I think that's a bold step for this community and something that a lot of people in this community, when they realise the implications that we're in control, will start appreciating. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Councillor, any further discussion? No further discussion. I'll put it to vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. Item 6.4.4, application to amend planning permit. Extension of time to relocate and repair timber heritage grandstand, Chirnside Park, 220 Watton Street, Werribee. The report is on page 133 to 140. Recommendations on page 134. Attachments are printed in a separate document, 258 to 287. Councillors, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Shaw, seconder. Councillor McAloney. Councillor Shaw. No discussion. Councillors, are there any speakers against this motion? Councillor Hooper.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tonight I speak against this amendment to the planning permit. But in doing so, I want to make it clear that I have found this to be a very, very difficult decision. I have noted the objections and understand the concerns that they have raised. We must be clear that what is being sought is to amend the original planning permit condition, not to revoke it. The amendment being sought is to allow until the end of June 2018 for the timber grandstand to be relocated and repaired and allow for new facilities to be open for use once car parking, gardening and landscaping is satisfactory. The current situation, however, we've got here is that we have a fantastic $11.75 million development ready to roll. And on current permit cannot until the old grandstand is relocated and restored. Now, it's been said around these parts that at times politics is about having courage to make a decision when the options are not easy. This is something I do not shy away from. It would be easy to ignore the objections and support this amendment. But it takes a lot of courage to speak against opening a facility, especially after the disruption the local VFL has had in the last year. What has troubled me is whether this situation would be different if it was a private developer going through this amendment process. And what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Before the shovel saw dirt, before subbies were called in and work orders placed, before work commenced, we knew the rules. We had written them ourselves. We issued the work permit. We did. No one else. Us. The football club, cricket club and the community is looking forward to this asset, which is why it's so frustrating to take this position. And I have to ask myself, do I want this asset held off, sitting there empty while a grandstand is put up and being completed? Because I share most people's view on this. It is absolutely frustrating to take this position, but again, I keep coming back. We knew the rules. There was no surprises. We had written them ourselves. It takes courage to vote against the objections raised. It takes a lot more courage to vote against the interests of the site's users. This comes back to us. Council voted for those rules in the first place. There was no surprises. People in the gallery even asked questions along the way. But despite how tonight unfolds, I do look forward to this park being opened and the development being completed.
Councillor Hooper, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. And the timber grandstand being restored to its former glory. And I would hope that such a quandary does not happen again in the future. We write the rules, we follow the rules. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Councillors, are there any speakers for this motion? Councillor McElhaney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's all the more reason while I will be supporting the officer's recommendation, while the original planning permit was issued before my time, I certainly won't be stopping a $11.7 million facility from opening its doors in January. This much needed redevelopment has been a long time coming, since 2008, and in fact, the 3rd of June 2008. And I'm not sure why this clause was inserted. However, the only common sense alternative is to amend the permit. To not do so would be to create havoc for our sporting facilities, our cricket, our football games in 2008, of which I'm not prepared to do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McElhaney. Councillors, are there any speakers against?
Oh, no.
Any further speakers for? Councillor Marcus.
Thank you very much, and I listened with great interest with what Councillor Hooper said, but look, this is the predicament we are in. What is really important here is that we do get the new facility open, but even more important is to make sure that we do rebuild and relocate this grandstand in the same position. And I think that's what some of our people sitting in the gallery tonight have been looking forward to. So I certainly will make sure that the grandstand is relocated and is repaired back to its former glory, and but not to hold up the other sporting facility, but importantly that this grandstand will be relocated and will be repaired. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus. Councillor, any speakers against this motion? Any further speakers for it? Councillor Shaw, I assume you're exercising your right.
I am. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do, obviously, I support this motion put forward by council officers. This is a really important development for our community. I know a couple of councillors have talked about this facility predominantly in a sports capacity, of course, which it is, but this is also a community facility. It has community common areas in this building, which a number of community groups and members of our community can actually use, and I think that's just as important in terms of actually supporting this motion tonight, because I certainly don't want to be locking out our community and accessing a wonderful brand new facility. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Councillors, any further discussion on this item? Councillor Gilligan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Look, I speak in favour of making sure that this motion goes through tonight, but I do it, I think, in a slightly different lens to some other councillors. It enables us to have further consideration about the cost implications of actually relocating and rebuilding this grandstand. I don't know the level of community consultation, although it is my understanding this could be in the ballpark of $250,000 to rebuild this particular grandstand. And I'm not entirely convinced yet whether or not that is a good spend, if indeed that is the final cost in relation to a rebuild. But what I do accept and indeed support this motion is to enable a further conversation in terms of us as a responsible authority to consider point C in particular, rather than having it exhaust, as Councillor Hooper is proposing, and therefore restrict the capacity for the community to use the existing site. I think there are further conversations that are absolutely necessary around this. I do not think there is sufficient public clarity on the level of the cost, or indeed whether it should be relocated, and if so, where, and indeed the level of support that existed in the first place that enabled the provision, as Councillor McElhinney pointed out, to be installed originally. So I think those points are important in this chamber, in this context, in relation to this motion, and I look forward in some respects to have to deal with this again at a later date. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gilligan. Councillors, are there any further speakers for this motion? Councillor Shaw, do you wish to exercise your right of reply? Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Councillors, put the motion. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. Excuse me. 6.5 other reports. 6.5.1 financial management report, September 2017. The report is on page 141 to 143 with a recommendation on page 141. Attachments page 144 to 156. Councillors, do I have a mover, please? Councillor McElhinney. Seconder, please. Councillor Gilligan. Councillor McElhinney.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The quarterly financial management report provides a comparison of our actual revenue and our expenditure against budget for the period September 2017. We're only in the first quarter and it's far too early where we are tracking because there are a number of timing differences, and that is not unusual for any organisation in the first 3 months. The body of the report provides considerable detail on key line items in the profit and loss statement and reasons for material variation against budget. The results reflect an operating surplus of $7.9 million for the first quarter. While it is favourable to budget by 6.9, at this stage this is largely due to timing differences. A reforecast was undertaken at the end of the quarter, and this reflects an expected operating surplus for the end of financial year of 5.5, which is $2 million lower than budget. Two key factors to note on this is the supplementary rates are trending higher than budget, and the lower net revenue anticipated by our RDF operations due to current limit capacity and additional costs to meet the EPA requirements. Our Western Leisure Services, which is a subsidiary of this council, is expected to come in close to budget at the end of the year, and the report for completeness also provides a capital works review. And you will note that at the last OCM I was at on the 8th of November, I spoke of this. The end of the year forecast as at quarter 1 is broadly consistent with the budget, $133 million worth of capital works and $153 million, 153 projects. And I look forward to seeing the mid-year report in 2018.
Thank you, Councillor McElhinney. Councillors, are there any speakers against this motion? Any further speakers for it? Councillor Gilligan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. First of all, I just saw in terms of one of the points I would make, and I know Councillor Barlow talks about this quite often in terms of making sure that the states and local government, particularly when it comes to school crossings and the delivery of funding there, it's great to see they've put in a bit more of their fair share of funding for that particular service to us here at Wyndham. But for me, one of the greatest concerns in relation to this document in particular is, of course, the significant risk in relation to the RDF site. And I say that in the context of course, we have a likely appeal that will proceed in relation to the RDF, but for the public to once again see the significant challenge that we as a council have. We have to deliver this service and deliver it well, and if we don't, we pay for it. And we pay for it in substantial reductions in terms of our surplus, which means less investment in the infrastructure. That's right, less investment in relation to our environmental initiatives, whether it's into our kindergartens and the myriad of services that we provide. And it is concerning to see that as a result of that appeal, we obviously have issues in seeking new clientele as a result of the risk and the ongoing concern of that project. So I thought I would highlight that in the context of this financial report, because I think this is a conversation that we will continue to have now and into the future. But it is critical that at moments like this, that we understand the underlying financial cost in relation to appeals processes in relation to Victorian government decisions that have been very clearly vetted, done over significant work by Stephen Thorpe and his department in relation to that works approval, has gone through a series of checks and really should be the end of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gilligan. Councillor, is there any further discussion on this item? Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I think your previous speakers have touched base on that. This has been a first quarter of the report, and our operating revenue was expected to be for $82.9 million. And there was operating revenue. We're well truly close to the mark. Operating surplus is 1 million, which is budgeted. Now actual was 7.9 million. So that's favourable. Obviously, though, as Councillor McLoney and Josh Gilligan have said, that what have made us a surplus is obviously, though, higher revenue from the supplementary rates, reflecting the continuous growth in the area and buying new properties, and board by and of course that generating the revenue to the council. But it's quite also, though, it's important to note that anyway, increased focus on local government enforcement, as mentioned here, and resulting in higher statutory fees and fines, mainly in the traffic management and prosecutions. So that also have added to what we've been in surplus. Council also benefited from additional interest revenues, which we have short term deposit with deposit, so we're getting interest. So that also have benefited for us. And employee costs were lower than the budgeted, as recruitment for some budgeted positions were yet to be finalised, and I'm glad that some of these positions were covered by the use of the casual or temporary staff. So I think it's a smart way of managing in getting into the surplus. We'll look truly now, this is just the first quarter, but we can also now forecast it, saying that it's going to be a operating surplus 7.6 million. So it's looking very, very positive in relations to the keeping surplus. It's important to see that, we have a surplus. We don't go in deficit, and nobody wants to go in deficit. So we're looking forward to see that the trend will continue. But I have seen that in the report, though, we haven't seen much improvement. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Haven't seen much improvement. We're having a decrease in a grant. We need to see the more money coming from the state and federal government so we can continue to serve the community, and this needs to be continued. So I'm concerned we need to have the more grants coming, make us more surplus. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Councillors, any further discussion on this matter? No further discussion. I put it to vote. All those in favour? Against?
Does that count?
Yeah, just it.
Does that count? Hang on. Okay, I'm firing on.
Yeah. The motion is carried. Councillors, item 6.5.2 is the Assembly of Councillors. Reports on page 157 with a recommendation on page 157. The attachments are on pages 158 to 160. Councillors, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Hooper. Seconder, please. Councillor Aaron Arn. Councillor Hooper? No? Any discussion, councillors? There being no discussion, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. Item 6.5.3 Smart City Expo World Congress Report. The report is on page 161 to 166 with a recommendation on page 162. There are no attachments. Councillors, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Aaron Arn. Seconder, please. Councillor Henry Barlow. Councillor Arn, you wish to speak to this motion? You don't. Councillors, are there any speakers against this motion? Any further speakers for it? Councillor Barlow.
Well, seeing all the publicity over the last couple of weeks, I better say something. I'll be positive. As a large growth council, we have the opportunity of actually looking at what this municipality is going to look like going into the future, long term. And I did say when I came onto council, going back over 12 months ago, that I'm looking at what this city is going to look like in 20 years' time. And I've always been of the view, one of my favourite sayings is, you'll never move forward while you continually look over your shoulder looking backwards. And we want to be a smart city. We're trying to attract the Australian education city here, and you hear a lot of discussion and talk about, you know, why hasn't it started? What are we doing? You know, what's the state government doing, etc., etc. Well, it's that old saying about God only helps the ones that help themselves. And I think that that's what we're trying to do. And some of the positives that came out of that, of nearly 700 exhibitors in that, is that once again we realised just how far behind Australia is in a whole series of areas. And we are the land of milk and honey. We're a great country. That's why everybody's busting themselves to come over here and live in Australia. But when you look at what's happening overseas, and when you look at what's happening with some countries that don't even hold a candle to us, and yet in some areas they're that far ahead of us, it's almost an embarrassment. And I want to touch base on two areas. One is I'm a firm believer and a big supporter of energy, waste to energy. And even though we're told that there are organisations here in Australia that are experts in waste to energy,
1 minute, Councillor Barlow.
We don't actually have a prime example. They're doing it overseas. We spoke to the Singapore consortium, and every multi-unit development, apartments and everything in Singapore is waste to energy. We can learn so much from that. And they told us next year in July, and God forbid I'm going to go because I don't want to keep getting it kicking, is that anybody and everybody who's involved in waste to energy is going to be there. And we need to send somebody there to talk to them. So, Mr Mayor, there are other examples, but I'm in the process of writing up a report, which I assume will go on some website on council eventually. But there were a lot of things, and I could go on about autonomous buses, you know, park and ride, you know, like some of the stuff that we looked at is unbelievable, wasn't it, Councillor Arn? And so thanks for your indulgence, Mr Mayor, and I won't go into it. I fully support the recommendation. We're going to get a lot out of it, and we'll see where we go to.
Thank you, Councillor Barlow. Councillors, any further discussion on this matter? No further discussion. I'll put it to vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. Item 7 is notices of motion. Item 7.1 is a notice of motion 571, optional preferential voting. Councillor Gilligan, you wish to read your motion out, and then I'll call for a seconder.
Yes, I can read it out. Bear with me. Essentially, I move that firstly, Council notes the recommendations of the Victorian Inspectorate's report titled Protecting Integrity, Investigations into 2016 Wyndham City Council Election, and 2, that Council writes to the Victorian Minister for Local Government, the Honourable Marlene Kairouz MP, requesting the Victorian Government adopt an optional preferential voting system in future local government elections to mitigate many of the issues raised in the report.
Councillors, before I call for a seconder, I should also note that the report begins on page 167 and 168 with a recommendation on page 168 with no attachments. Councillor, can I have a seconder, please, for this? Councillor Hooper. Councillor Gilligan.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. Community confidence in elections is a key component of democracy. And that is why I believe Wyndham City Council, in noting the recommendations by the Victorian Inspectorate, should go further and write to the Minister for Local Government recommending optional preferential voting for future local council elections. A system that discourages voters from participating by having to number every box, in the case of Chafee Ward 35 or indeed in Harrison Ward 41, numbering each and every box correctly for their vote to be counted, is a system, in my view, that needs review. Indeed, in some wards, as outlined in this motion, you see nearly 1 in 5 eligible voting residents in some wards were not included in terms of their vote under the current full preferential voting model. In some respects, and I remember having this conversation throughout the election and indeed after, there is a legitimate argument to be put that perhaps if we had an optional preferential voting system, it may have changed the election outcome in relation to some wards, because those votes may have been included. And indeed, it is certainly my view that in the case of one candidate who was a former councillor in the Chafee Ward, I believe that the outcome would have been different. In my view, we must minimise any roadblocks that exist in the way of communities selecting their representatives on councils, and we must also give maximum confidence to communities that discouraging candidates to take advantage of the full preferential model is appropriate. And let's discuss now the models that we're talking about. In New South Wales, local government elections, they have an optional preferential voting model. In Queensland, local government elections, they have an optional preferential voting model. In South Australia, they have an optional preferential voting model, and they're proposing what we call a partial preferential voting model, which enables, essentially in the case of a ward where there are, in the case of, let's take Chafee Ward, 4 candidates, you must nominate a minimum of 4 boxes. So as we can see here, significant parts of this country in relation to local government elections adopt either a partial or optional preferential voting model. In the state of Victoria, we operate under a full preferential voting model. And in my view, there are subliminal warnings that were given in relation to the Inspectorate's report that suggests that that model could be misused in relation to an election and should be considered in the context of that report. So I think this is an important consideration tonight about what sort of message we send around having a strong democratic system that maximises community input. And that is why I have put this motion tonight. I accept that there is a local government review that is underway, and indeed the legislation isn't too far away. But that should not discourage us from taking a position as a council to give the strongest message to community that we have not only noted the report, but we believe that this is another great example of how we strengthen the democratic process here in the City of Wyndham and simply get on with the job for the next 3 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gilligan. Councillors, are there any speakers against this motion? Councillor Barlow.
Thank you. Mr Mayor, firstly, I don't have a problem with the idea of optional preferential voting system. What I have an issue with is, as Councillor Gilligan mentioned, the local government Mayor's advisory panel, which I was a member of, where just over 12 months ago, 13 mayors across Victoria were chosen to work with the local government minister and the local government department and the bureaucrats within local government to review the Local Government Act. And there's a whole range of issues in there. Now, after all of that hard work and 2 local government ministers, that review, the draft, is going to be released within 2 weeks. Now, in that, there's going to be a whole range and suite of things that this council is going to want to make a submission on. And writing a letter to the minister at a stage where you're actually going to be doing a full Victorian review or draft review, asking councils, community, interested bodies such as the MAV and the VLGA to make comment to, is a waste of a letter. The minister isn't going to take a notice of a letter from the City of Wyndham saying, we would like to see this, because they're going to be concentrating on, when we talk about submissions as to the additional powers that the mayors are supposed to be getting, The fact that there's possibly, and I don't know what's in it yet because I haven't read it, even though I've been working on the document for the last 12 months. There's going to be maybe 2 by 2 mayor's elections in the future. So you will elect the mayor, there'll be the mayor for 2 years, and another mayor will go on for 2 years for continuity. There is a suite of things in how they want to change the Local Government Act. I think the far more professional approach would be is to say, vote against this, and then when the local government, the draft Local Government Act review comes out, is we can talk about a whole range of things and have our view on all of these different areas. And I'll speak more later on because there's another motion, Mr Mayor, that I want to talk to. But to preempt and cherry pick one thing that we can do, I think is just a waste of time. Let's wait and do a full review, a full submission, and put in a combined submission on what it is that we all, as councillors, agree on. Remembering, of course, the community can make their own submissions as well.
Thank you, Councillor Barlow. Councillor, is there any further speakers for the motion? For the motion? Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So I do support this notice of motion and also Councillor Gilligan's comments. I also take on board what Councillor Barlow is saying, but even if it's through the Local Government Act review or this notice of motion or both, it is important that we as a council send a strong message that we don't want to see what happened in the 2016 election happen again in the 2020 election. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Councillors, any further speakers against this motion? Any further speakers for the motion? Councillor Hooper.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I echo Councillor Gilligan's comments as well. I'm supporting the notice of motion tonight for a few simple reasons. Firstly, I believe a move to the optional preferential voting system would address some of the alarming election behaviour at the last election, particularly group voting and dummy candidates. I'm also supporting it due to the very high number of informal votes, which more than doubled in each ward from 2012 to 2016.
Point of order, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Barlow, under section.
Yeah, under the section 5B. I'm sorry, Councillor Hooper, but you claim that there were dummy candidates. We had a report handed down by the inspectorate that actually couldn't prove that there were dummy candidates.
Okay.
So you may have a personal view that the inspectorate was wrong, Mr Mayor, but I think it needs to be clarified very, very clearly.
Okay, mate. I appreciate that. I appreciate that commentary.
Councillor Hooper.
That's okay.
I'm the one that's running this meeting. You are correct, Councillor Barlow. Councillor Hooper, if you carry on.
Yep, that's right. I'm supporting it due to the very high number of informal votes, which more than doubled in each ward from 2012 to 2016. In that Wyndham City Council election. In fact, in Harrison Ward, I think it was almost challenging the actual result, and I would possibly not even be here. But, Mr Mayor, I think that while residents of Wyndham saw through a lot of obvious cartel-like behaviours of certain candidates, what we saw in the end was a group of very different individuals actually elected in the end, here to serve the whole community. Finally, Mr Mayor, I would like to think it's true to say that the community has had confidence in its elected councillors, and a process such as what Councillor Gilligan is offering is something along that line. We work with the world that we know, and at the moment we don't know what the LGA is proposing. We don't know what options are in the legislation coming forward, but what we can say as a group is we've had enough, and that this is a clear message to the state government, who should not ignore it given the state of the inspectorate review that we just went through, about what we say and what we expect for the residents of this community. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Councillors, are there any further speakers against this motion? Any further speakers for? Councillor Marcus.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I would certainly like to support Councillor Gilligan's notice of motion of optional preferential voting. I think we need to tell the government. We know that you've been working Henry, but I think we still need to note, because we're often putting up notices of motion, so what you're saying, well, will they take any notice of this? Well, I would hope that they would take notice of a very important issue like this. We had the records out of any city in Victoria with the 95 candidates, and so therefore I think it's something that the residents will expect, that we have this tried to be changed. But I'd go one step further, and I've spoken to a lot of people since the elections. They are all in favour of the first 3 or 4 past the post, and then it would stop all of the dirtiness that occurred in the last election.
Geez, I hope I get the donkey.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Marcus. Councillors, any further speakers against this motion? Any further speakers at all? For or against?
For.
Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I think it's great to see that my fellow councillor Josh Gilligan have done motions for optional preferences. I think it's important to see that a lot of people from South Asian community people, they can't understand how to vote. And I know that, in fact, I've met a lot of people in community, when they migrated here in the country, they only vote one for the candidate. When they come to Australia, they don't get a formal education how to vote for all of them. And some of them people have voted wrongly, or they missed out the boxes. So the vote has become informal, obviously. So I think if that would happen, I'll be very happy to support that, if the people can only have options for positions 1, 2, 3, 4 people vote, or partially just to even vote one and your vote will be counted. Result of that, I think, is also encourage those people who work hard in the community and get maximum primary votes, because that will benefit them to get elected rather than based on preferences voted. I know that in this council now, number of councillors, including myself and other councillors, have benefited with the current system. So it's important to see that now what Josh Gilligan is proposing. I totally support that, if that Victoria State can adopt the system to just optional preferences system, which have worked in the South Australia, New South Wales and Queensland, will really help. And looking forward to 2020 election, that will be great to see that, those people are only going to get elected who actually work hard in the community and achieve primary votes. But also, though, saying that I disagree with the concept of not encouraging people, because it's important now, the more people participate in democracy, that doesn't mean to say they're all not interested. So this system, optional preference system, will actually help. It's particularly the Chinese, the Indians, those come from their country, not of China, but particular South Asian countries, is actually the people don't understand, because they only vote one. If they vote one in the current system, the vote become informal. So I'm highly supportive of that if the Victorian government can adopt this recommendation and put forward for the Victoria-wide. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Khan, for speaking for the motion. Councillors, any further speakers against the motion? Any further speakers for the motion? Councillor McElhaney.
I'd just like to say I've been part of 4 elections. I was part of an election with 3 candidates. I was part of an election of 11 candidates. I was part of an election of 19 candidates. I was part of an election of 41 candidates. I just hope that the next election we get the right people standing for elections. That's all I ask. Genuine people standing for elections without ulterior motives, that really representing this community. And if it is 40 candidates again, so be it. But I would hope that we don't get 80 candidates, because, yeah, just it's over the top. And for a person that didn't think I would get in on number 36 on the page, and on the first vote count, I got in by 1 vote, so every vote counts. And then on the recount, I got in on 8 votes. Yeah, so I will be supporting your optional preferential voting. But I just want to see that we get genuine candidates standing at the next 2020 elections. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McElhaney. Councillors, any further speakers against the motion? No further speakers at all? I put the motion. All those in...
So rather reply, because there was...
You do, yes, correct.
Sorry. Sorry, Councillor. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Look, I accept largely what Councillor Barlow has put in terms of waiting to make a submission once the review is out. But I think in some respects, the principal point of putting this today is this is the first OCM that has enabled us since the report has been made public to make a comment and indeed make a decision like this one. And that is why I think it does deserve its own recognition, a very strong message to the community that we have not only noted this report, but gone further than what the report has stated in order to, as I think very clearly Councillor Shaw and Councillor McElhinney have pointed out, ensure that the 2020 election maximum confidence is given to community. I think we have a unique situation in this instance where we've gone through a very thorough process in relation to the election, a very gruelling process, and something that I would never want to go through again. But notwithstanding that, making sure that we send a very strong message to the community that we've noted this, we accepted the report, we put this proposal, and we move on. And I think that is why this notice of motion has been important to be put tonight. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gillian. Councillors, if you indicate clearly, please. All those in favour of the motion, please raise your hand. Against? The motion is carried. Councillors, item 7.2. Notice of motion 572, car parking and public transport solutions. Councillor Arn, I should say, you wish to read out your... I was close. I just should have left the K off.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm moving the notice of motion that appears in the agenda papers. However, I want to delete the words and funding from the part of the sentence in point 2 of the notice of motion, which previously read a planning and funding partnership with the state government.
Thank you. So I'm taking it as submitted. You're not going to read it all out, but you're putting forward as submitted. Okay. Councillors, can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Hooper. Councillors, I must say also the report's on page 169 and 170 with a recommendation on page 170 with no attachments. Councillor Arn, wish to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Mayor. So in speaking to my notice of motion, I believe most of us know parking around train stations has been a long-standing issue for our city. Currently, during weekdays, the 500-space car park at Williams Landing train station is already full around 7 a.m. in the morning. Temporary commercial car parks cost $3 a day, are provided by commercial companies, but there is still no permanent solution. The state government is about to complete the 150 spaces car park on the southern part of Williams Landing station on Wallace Avenue, Point Cook. However, this car park does not improve the parking issue around the train station because the location was already used as a car park and more cars already parked there before the construction of this park. I have also heard from the community that residents are facing similar issues at Tarney train station, Hoppers Crossing station, and Werribee station. Therefore, the challenges residents face to get to work and other commitments by public transport is felt across Wyndham. This is why further report I am requesting tonight will cover more than multi-story car parks, but other related public transport issues as outlined in part 4 of my notice of motion. Mr. Mayor, most, if not all, councillors have talked about different public transport concerns, and some have taken even more active roles on these issues. And this is because we all know that this public transport problem affects real people and our family, work, and other relationships. I will not restate the content and I include in this notice of motion, but I do need to acknowledge that as population in our city is increasing, and this is one of the main reasons transport issues have been one of the top priorities for our community. Therefore, A better and more reliable public transport is one of the key elements for solving road congestion issues. Research shows an interconnected public transport system is key to achieving a 30-minute neighborhood and a smart city, as it ensures accessibility for residents to the jobs and the services that they need. I have an open mind about any future action the Council could consider on those issues, and I look forward to receiving further officers' advices about solutions to tackle long-standing car parking problems, as well as complementary public transport solutions for all of Wyndon. Ms. Mayor, I commend this motion to my colleagues, and thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Arndt. Councillors, are there any speakers against this motion? Any further against? Councillor McElhaney.
Yes, I'd just like to say I've thought hard on this one. I'm actually not sure why this notice of motion came tonight. We have officers' reports that come up to us regularly. Only last term, the Mayor, I know for a fact, it was one of his #1 priorities on his portfolio, where he dealt with this at, I'm just thinking of the organisation that you went.
Interface.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, point of order.
Public transport and.
Councillor Khan, please quote your point of order on what section?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Lack of respect for the opinion and beliefs and right and responsibility in others, Council Code of Conduct 5B(c).
Councillor Khan, I don't see that there's any lack of respect. Councillor
Absolutely.
McElhaney was asking what the organisation was, and I said, and I believe Councillor Barlow said, Interface Council, and that's correct. Thank you, Councillor Khan. Please continue, Councillor McElhaney.
Thank you. This council has already a lot of information and priorities. We can't forget that we just had Wyndham's Get Wyndham Moving campaign from the previous council, and we were very successful on that, and we highlighted the key issues. We've had a lot of advocacy and a lot of work done behind the scenes, so I'm not sure what writing yet another report coming to council in March, again, when we've already got some of these issues already written down. One of the issues that we've received as a consequence of the Get Wyndham Moving is we've just received $1.8 million worth of funding for maintenance and state. We've just received 150 car parking. I know that's not enough, but I'm just querying why we have to put this report together. We're already stating the obvious, and we have a portfolio heading this issue already. Perhaps rather than looking at multi-storey parking, we should be looking at maybe some of a different scenario, park and ride scenarios. I know the state government is looking at funding these dedicated bus services and sourcing a significant parcel of land in growth areas. Maybe that's an option, but to write another report, I know and I respect Councillor Arndt coming with this report or notice of motion, but I'm just asking, do we need another report when we've already been extremely successful in gathering evidence for our Get Wyndham Moving campaign? We actually won a national recognition at federal level on this, and we've been getting funding. And I know we need more funding, but at the end of the day, do we keep writing reports? Why don't we just work with the resources we've got and concentrate on those priorities? Because many of those priorities that Councillor Arndt is talking about are the priorities of this council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McElhaney. Councillor, is there any further speakers for this motion? Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Now that there has been an amendment to this motion in relation to the funding aspect, I actually will support it. I agree that there is growing concern about the lack of parking at train stations across our municipality. I do share the frustrations as I park at either Werribee or Hoppers Crossing at least 3 times a week to get into the city for work. And if you aren't there early, you generally miss out, which means you need to park in nearby streets. And I know this is causing concerns for those residents. which is why it's important this issue is looked at as outlined in the motion for the whole municipality, not just Williams Landing, and the fact that there has been a petition about this tonight. There have been a number of councillors who have raised our transport issues over the last 12 months, including parking at all of our train stations in our city. Car parks at train stations are not a council responsibility. They are a state government responsibility. I also believe, though, building multi-storey car parks is not a sustainable option. But I agree we need to advocate and continue to work with the state government on this issue. In fact, a letter was sent at my insistence to the state government in September about the appalling state of the Avalon train station car park. It should have been sealed and line marked years ago. The reality is there will never be enough car parks at train stations for every commuter. Therefore, while I do support this notice of motion, I do not believe that just adding more car parks at train stations is the only answer. This needs a holistic approach incorporating a range of transport options. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Without preempting what you're saying, I believe you might have meant aircraft station.
Sorry, I did. Thank you, aircraft station.
Oh, well,
I do hope I write to the right minister then. I'm pretty sure it was aircraft. Thank you.
Councillors, are there any further speakers against this motion? Councillor Barlow.
Yeah, geez, I'm starting to sound negative. But I want to thank Councillor R for putting this up, because basically his motion has stating all of the things that we're doing already. In fact, the first minister I spoke to when I became the mayor, within the first week or so of becoming the mayor, was the Minister for Public Transport, Jacinta Allen, and there was a lot of discussion about car parking at stations, etc., etc., etc. So this has been ongoing. The interface councils, this is a problem right across metropolitan Melbourne and the outer ring, the 10 outer ring councils. It's not just us, but in fact, there's been a substantive amount of work that's been done already for this, and the Western Transport Alliance are currently putting together a major report on traffication issues, on car parking issues, etc. So we're waiting on their findings as well, which is probably the report that Councillor Ahn is asking for, where he says a more detailed report by March 2018. And I think that the Western Transport Alliance report might actually provide all of that. And I'm hoping it does, because our council officers who are working in this transport area and that are absolutely up to their necks in working on a whole range of different issues. And I don't know where we're going to get the resources to go doing major work again. However, one of the things and Councillor McElhaney touched base on it, multi-storey car parks. And Councillor Ahn mentioned before, there's a private car park in Williams Landing, $3 a day. And people aren't happy that they've got to pay $3 for all-day parking. Well, excuse me. $3 a day. Now, private enterprise being what it is, I wish I had the money to buy a big block of land and charge $3 a day for parking, because I would probably become a millionaire in a very quick period of time. If you go down the line, and I'll be interested to see where it's going, because as Councillor McElhaney said, and she's dead right, the state government is currently looking at multi-storey car parking, but if they do it, it could be a public-private partnership, which means that the private company is going to want some sort of a return on their money, because building multi-storey car parks is a multi-million-dollar exercise, and they're not going to do it just for the love of it. They're going to want a return on their money, like all good developers and multinationals do. So I don't know what the director, Kate Roffey's organisation is going to come up with as a report, but to be honest, I see nothing in here that we're not already doing. We've already spoken to people. We've actually asked the feds to look at putting money in to work on the regional rail link. In fact, it's in the budget papers that we're asking for money to build a train station. It's all there. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Barlow. Councillor, is there any further discussion for the motion?
I was going to say something.
For the motion?
Yes.
Councillor Marcus.
I certainly support Councillor Arndt's notice of motion. It's very interesting to note that how quickly the car parks fill up. And this has been an ongoing issue. I'm like Henry now, perhaps sounding a bit negative. This has been an ongoing issue for a long, long time. But we do have to get the cars off the roads. There's no doubt about that, because I'm hearing now that with the opening of the new road out to the airport, it's now taking 20 minutes longer to get through the Burnley Tunnel. So the only way we're really going to keep our roads free of cars is to have them travelling by train. So I think it's really, really good that, although Henry, I know what you've said, but we still have to keep reminding them that they've got to do something about it. Manor Lakes might be still reasonably okay, but Werribee's not, Hoppers Crossing's not, and Williams Landing's not. So we just have to keep advocating to make sure that they do know and understand that we have problems out here in the West.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus. Councillor, is there any further speakers against? Excited, Councillor Gilligan.
It's been a long night.
That's all right. Test two. Councillors, any further speakers on this motion? Councillor Gilligan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Look, I will speak in favour of this notice of motion tonight, and I think for me what comes out of this is very much point 3, that there is a report that's coming back to council in relation to the petition that was tabled tonight, and very much highlights the rationale for why I will support this. And given that there is a report coming back in relation to that issue, broadening that out to have a conversation in the first quarter of next year around what our priorities are on public transport probably isn't a bad thing, because that will be in the lead up to the budget, particularly the Victorian and federal budgets for that year, and potentially leading into obviously the Victorian election later that year. And heaven forbid if we have enough dual citizen problems going, we might have a federal election by then too. So I think it is a good segue for us to be reiterating those key project priorities for us in Wyndham, and that's why I will support your motion tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Gilligan. Councillor, any further discussion? No. Oh, there's no more again, so any further discussion?
Yes.
Councillor Hooper.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. I speak in favour of this as well. If we're already doing the work, then there's no harm in consolidating that into a substantive paper about the Wyndham experience, about what it means to us and our community. Like, for example, driving on a daily basis myself, the more we can get off the roads, the better for everyone. The last month in particular, it seems that the roads have just gone absolutely bonkers, crazy. The amount of traffic that's coming on board now is blowing me away. So refreshing our reports and making sure they're current and up to date with current trends, I think is actually quite vital. And we need to keep the pressure on as well. We know the work our officers do. They make us look absolutely awesome. And if we can use their ammunition to put the pressure on the state and federal governments to deliver for our community, then I say bring it on. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Hooper. Councillors, any further discussion on this? Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I would like to say that, I live in close by the Williams Landing train station, and during my election campaign, I've come across a number of people and everybody complaining about the car parking. Everyone says car parking is the biggest issue. I think we have to put aside our personal, opinion, but we have to listen to what residents say and let's be real. The problem is a car parking in Williams Landing. If you go morning 7 o'clock, you see there's already car parks full, people just And some of those resulted in Tarnit. I know that Tarnit, not speaking on the motion, but again, Tarnit has same issues, people parking outside and getting a ticket from the council. And a big issue. I think multi-level car parking, it won't hurt us. I'm very supportive of it, no matter how much they're going to cost. And we know that it's not a state government. It's a state government responsibility, not a council responsibility. But we need to say, if we need to write a 10 times report, we should do it, because our residents are crying. And by the way, this Point Cook, and when you come from the Point Cook, they all drop their kids and, you know, their loved ones to the train station, and it's really kiosk. You go in the morning, and I think the people worried about the car park. I don't want to say too much about it, but I really believe, you know, the car parking is important in Williams Landing. It's a growing suburb, and I think somehow we made a mistake in the planning. This thing should be done in the before, but hey, let's get real. I think we can raise our voice, and we should be writing a letter to the Green, Liberals, every single party was interested to make sure the Williams Landing car parking, if the government changes, they should make priority the Williams Landing car parking, Tarnit car parking, and also Harper Crossing. All car parking get it done, because we're a growing city, we pay a lot of taxes to the government, and what we're getting in return, they're not hearing us. There's always plans, there's always reports coming. I have not seen anything. You know, we need to look forward to, you know, tell them enough and say, look, we need more car parking. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Councillors, any further discussion on this matter?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like a point of clarification. There's been some discussion about this. There's nothing actually in the motion that asks us to write to the state government. It says that we're requesting a more detailed report by 2018 on advocacy priorities around public transport, etc., but there's nothing in here, according to what Councillor Khan was saying, there's nothing in here about contacting the state government about this. This is an internal document that's going to come to us. So I think there's been, I think a few people have got themselves a little muddled up as to if the council officers are going to follow this, then this is an internal document that will come to us, and nothing about sending it to the state government or whatever. So
Thank you,
I just thought I'd clarify that for everyone.
Probably would have been more prudent to call a point of order, but I'll take your point. Councillors.
Point of clarification.
Point of clarification.
Cheeky man.
Hey, it's true. You guys have either got to write it correctly.
Councillors, all those in favour of this motion? Oh, sorry, you do have right of reply, Councillor Ahn. My apologies.
As Councillor Barlow mentioned about the $3 commercial car park, I want to make it clear that that commercial car park is just temporary. So, and there is no permanent solution. So this has been a more and more serious issue now, and the community don't think we have done enough. And this is further evidenced by the receipt of council of petitions detailing some of these concerns recently. Thank you, Ms. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ahn. Councillors, all those in favour of the motion, please raise your hand. Chairman, all those against? The motion is carried.
Mr. Mayor, can I have a call for division, please?
I'll say it for you, Councillor Khan. It's all right, because probably
Cool.
pick the name.
Councillors, all those please who voted in favour of the motion, please raise your hand. Councillor Gillian, Councillor Villagonzalo, Councillor Shaw, Councillor Marcus, Councillor Ahn, Councillor Hooper, Councillor Khan against, Councillor McElhaney, Barlow and Maynard. Thank you, councillors. Councillors, item 7.3, notice of motion 573, strengthening the office of the Mayor. The report is on page 171, recommendation page 171 with no attachments. Councillor Gilligan, would you read out your notice of motion, please?
No, it's Heather Marcus.
Beg your pardon, sorry. Councillor Marcus.
No, you're right.
It's been a long...
I
apologise, Councillor Gillian.
Councillor Barlow, nice try.
Marcus, please, if you would.
That the motion resolved to undertake a review of the Wyndham Governance Local Law 2013 regarding the election of up to 2 deputy mayors and a change to the method of the election of the mayor, and B, commence a 28-day community consultation for the proposed changes from Monday the 11th of December 2017.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus. Councillors, do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Gilligan. Councillor Marcus, you wish to speak to your motion?
Thank you. The proposed review is designed to examine changes to the local law to strengthen the office of the mayor at the Wyndham City Council. The review will include the option of enabling council to appoint up to 2 deputy mayors, as well as introducing a clear and transparent nomination process in relation to the nominations for the mayor, office of the mayor. As stated on the council's website, Wyndham's growth shows no signs of slowing, and this enormous growth presents huge challenges. The 2011 census shows that 55 people have moved to Wyndham, and I believe the birth rate on average is 87 babies per week. And also, property prices in Wyndham have soared 130% in the last decade. This is where people really want to live, and this is where they want to be. So with this current growth rate, we need to now work harder and constantly in order to catch up. This council is one of the leading councils. It is a smart council. It is a council that wants to make sure that we can communicate with all of our residents. And this is why it is vitally important, I think, that having 2 deputies would make this happen, even spread more evenly over our city. Having a strong mayor assisted by 2 deputies will strengthen this council. It will mean that as the population grows, it will give more representation and a wider coverage to this city. Having 2 deputies would be beneficial, as they would receive experience and training if they want to become the mayor the following year. It is important that we do have an experienced mayor, and this would show the public that we are very inclusive, wanting to make sure that we are here as a good team. As we all know, the mayor in a growing city like ours cannot be everywhere. It is not possible. I have been the mayor and the deputy on 2 occasions, and I know that feeling. As mayor, you can receive up to 25 invitations a week, sometimes 3 invites on the same night. As the mayor, it would be great to know you have your 2 deputies who can deputise for you, and that the residents will still be happy, as they always seem to want the mayor to be at their functions. I have spoken to mayors and councillors, and all advise that the workloads now are much greater as our populations grow. We also have to take into consideration that some councillors do have full-time work, and they do not have as much time as those councillors who are retired or maybe just working with family at home. I believe 2 deputies would give us more clout if we use them wisely with the mayor when going to advocate to the federal and state governments on our challenges. I believe that we should look at our delegations better when going to the ministers. The mayor is the leader of the council and is the official spokesperson, but there are times when the mayor may want to take leave, may fall sick, and may be away for some time. And then between the 2 deputies, they can work together on behalf of the mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus. Just picking up on your comments, the 2011-2016 census was 55,000.
I don't know, that's what I got off the website.
You said 55.
Sorry?
You said 55, 55,000.
That's what I got off the website.
Okay. Councillors, can I have any speakers against this motion, please? Councillor Barlow.
Oh, yeah. Here we go. Well, you keep trying to do the right
Didn't I do a seconder?
Point of clarification, sorry, I just want to check. Does the seconder get to speak before the against or not? No, my apologies, I just wanted to check.
Yeah, I did. JG, that's you.
That's me.
Thank you. I know it has been a long night.
That's right.
Councillor Barlow, please.
I cannot support the motion. For the first time in my life, I think I'm actually going to read a speech because I want to make sure I get this right. I cannot support the motion as put by Councillor Heather Marcus. This motion does 2 things. It makes a mockery of our local law, and it will cost this council thousands of dollars for something that will never happen. Why won't it happen, you may ask? 12 months ago, I was chosen along with 12 other mayors from around Victoria to be on the local government's Mayors Advisory Panel. Along with local government minister and senior local government bureaucrats, we've been reviewing the Local Government Act. The draft from this hard work will be going out in about 2 weeks for local government and community consultation, along with the MAV, of which Councillor Gilligan is on the board of. The legislation will be in Parliament during the first quarter of 2018, all being well. Without going into confidential detail, of which I am bound, I can assure you that our current local law will be in sync with the wording of the Act, and our wording is a deputy mayor. I've told all my fellow councillors that this council can put in a submission to the review to amend the Act to be more than one deputy mayor if they wish, just as I said earlier on tonight. This is the official line, because if the Act passes into legislation for a deputy mayor, there will never ever be more than one deputy mayor, and this whole process will have been in vain. Wasted officer time, wasted councillors' time, wasted community time, and wasted money. Those are the facts. The City of Casey, which has been mentioned previously in other discussions, has 2 deputy mayors. Well, has anyone asked them what was the real reasons for that council to elect 2 deputy mayors? But we are a progressive council, or at least I thought we were, because we are one of the few councils that introduced portfolios to allow councillors the opportunity to manage a part of this council and involve our community in another ongoing form of community consultation. Let's look at our capital city. Melbourne City Council has twice as many residents as us and has 1 mayor and 1 deputy mayor.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
You quote your point of order, please, Councillor.
Can you stop the clock while we're listening to this?
A statement that will or likely to be misleading deceptive a person. In Melbourne City's population is 180,000, not even more than our population.
135.
130,000, sorry, it's a resident.
Oh, is it? City Council,
Melbourne City Council, that's correct.
130,000 people.
That's right. For ABS, I've got the data here.
Oh, good.
I say, so they're way smaller than us, is that what you're saying? So they're much smaller than Wyndham?
Yeah, well, they are more smaller than Wyndham.
We can have,
Since there's been an
councillors,
open
please.
debate. Eh?
If we can have no interjection, please. If I'm hearing a point of order, I'd like to do so with some clarity so I can hear what's going on. I can't argue with the ABS, Councillor Khan. You obviously must be correct. Councillor Barlow, please carry on.
I will correct that statement and say the greater city of Melbourne, which includes the city of Port Phillip, etc., all have 1 mayor and all have 1 deputy mayor, and there's over 1 million people. Now, so I'll say the greater city. When I was in Barcelona, I had the opportunity to sit and talk to the mayor of Prague, the capital of Czechoslovakia. 1 mayor, 10 councillors for 1.6 million people, and no need to have 2 deputy mayors. The 10 councillors seem to be able to manage that size population. Councillors, let's not waste any more time and let us instead refocus on what is important for this city. And that's not if, and I never had a problem with this, there were times, no matter how many councillors we asked, we could not get anybody to go to an event or a function. Could not, from 11 of us, could not find somebody to go. Having 2 deputy mayors, unless they're going to be full-time deputy mayors, isn't going to solve the problem that was mentioned before. So, not in favour.
Thank you, Councillor Barlow. Councillors, any speakers for the motion? Councillor Gilligan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I do support Councillor Marcus's notice of motion tonight because these proposed amendments provide the option for a creation of a resolution by council for a second deputy mayor and the introduction of a clear nomination process for mayor as part of a package to strengthen the office of the mayor. And if you consider the rationale of Councillor Marcus to push for community consultation immediately, it is to get on with what is a lengthy process in relation to making bylaw amendments. And it's worth highlighting that in the case
local law amendments. Point of order, it's a local law amendment.
Local laws.
local bylaw amendments or local law amendments, if you wish to make that point. And I'd also like to highlight and reiterate the points that were made about the City of Melbourne in relation to the City of Wyndham. But anyway, the creation of a second Deputy Mayor will enable stronger representation of the Office of the Mayor across events and maximise Wyndham City Council's visibility at key events both within and outside our city. Workplaces are adding flexibility to the Labor workforce because they recognise rigid organisational structures can lock people out. We need a flexible model too. And that is why creating 2 deputy mayors provides that flexibility when you take into account, as Councillor Marcus pointed out, members that work full-time and those that do not. And unfortunately, under the remuneration model that we have for local councillors, some cannot afford to, and in some instances, some of the models that have been raised, I don't know the level of remuneration that are given to councillors, particularly on overseas models. I do accept Councillor Barlow's point, though, that should the Local Government Act review determine legislatively that we cannot proceed with 2 deputy mayors, then so be it. But that does not mean that we should not pursue this review, and indeed we should not be pushing for its implementation. And that is something that we also don't know. There are clearly known unknowns in relation to when this will come in, how it will be structured, when it will be introduced and implemented. But what we do know is that there is a clear rationale, in my view, that there should be a consideration of up to 2 deputy mayors and pushing for a community process as is required as soon as possible. Finally, I have chosen not to respond to any requests for comment by the public on my position on Councillor Marcus's motion because I believe in adhering to the Councillor Code of Conduct. Indeed, Section 2.16 of the Code clearly states that councillors are not permitted to make public statements in support or opposition of any motion prior to a decision of council being made. And I find it remarkable to see community residents state on social media that some councillors have provided written responses prior to Councillor Marcus's motion being formally put in this chamber. And it appears responses may have been made without any knowledge of the wording of this notice of motion itself. It is unreasonable to highlight that this action is not only unfair on councillors who have adhered to the Code of Conduct tonight, but have been disadvantaged in relation to this debate in not being able to express a public view on this matter, and as a result appeared unwilling to debate the merits of Councillor Marcus's motion. And I want to state that tonight because I look forward, as of tomorrow, to continue and alongside the community consultation about why strengthening the office of the Mayor is important and my clear adherence to a code of conduct I signed a fortnight ago. And I'll leave my remarks there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gilligan. Councillors, any further speakers against the motion? Councillor McAloney.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I do not support Councillor Marcus's notice of motion tonight. There are many reasons for this, and some have already been covered by Councillor Barlow. This motion is really about 2 deputy mayors, not strengthening the office of the Mayor, of which is now trying to be pitched or spun, not only to us but to the broader community. Most of you are aware of my feelings on this issue when recently a foreshadowed motion came to the chamber at a recent statutory meeting. Given that 78 of the 79 Victorian councils do not have 2 deputy mayors, how could any councillor sit here and say it represents good governance or best practice? I would also hasten to add that the nomination and voting processes for the election of the Mayor is fully outlined in the Local Government Act 1989 and our government local law. It is arguable that coming up with the process on the run would actually be in contravention of both legal documents.
Point of order, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Gilligan.
That is misleading. The City of Melton has implemented this exact process that's being proposed in adherence with the Act.
Thank you. I'm very...
If that's correct.
Make that 77.
If that's correct, Councillor Gilligan. Councillor...
I stand corrected, 77 of 79.
I'm not aware of that, but I'll take you on face value if that's the case. Councillor...
Yeah.
Point of order, Mr Mayor. Again, that is misleading. That was not a reference to 2 deputy mayors. That was, my reference was in relation to the nomination process. Councillor McAloney was correct in the first instance. It is 78 out of 79.
Ah, okay, thank you.
I am very disappointed to find that ourselves in this position on the eve of Christmas and holidays. Our reputation has been damaged by the proposal for 2 deputy mayors. Council officers advised against this.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Khan.
The statement that will lead or likely to mislead a deceptive person for saying that, the damage has been
What
damaged.
section, please, Councillor Khan?
Section is 5B. Say it's a misleading statement, which is saying that, damage has been damaged. Reputation has been damaged. How does he measure damage? Reputation has been damaged.
It's a matter of opinion, Councillor Khan. I can't either agree or disagree with it. It's a matter of opinion.
Okay.
Please carry on, Councillor McElhaney.
Councillor officers, as I said, advised against this. However, Councillor Marcus has noticed the motion tonight, and those supporting this motion have continued down this path and ignored advice. Is this the best use of officers' time and resources? The unnecessary financial and administrative burden on the organisation, the legal advice, the cost of community engagement, not only to mention the community responding. We've seen the responses to date already from direct mail comments in the street and social media. The confidence of this in our governance and decision-making has been steadily improving over the last 4 years, as measured by the state government and council surveys. I truly don't understand why it has been decided to risk this now, because the actions of us do affect our community surveys, I can assure you. If there are councillors who have been on council for a number of years who now support new process for electing the mayor and supporting 2 deputy mayors, despite being the mayor or deputy mayor before, then tonight is the credibility and transparency test for them. They must tell this council and the community what was wrong with the previous processes and the councils that justify this sudden change. They must give strong evidence-based reasons to support the chaotic, sloppy and questionable notice of motion right on the eve of Christmas. The item should not overshadow the great work that this city is doing in this city. For the new councillors, sorry?
Can you wrap up, please? You're on
yes,
over time.
For the new councillors, I ask not to simply vote on this tonight. I ask that you actually provide reasons on the basis why you're supporting this decision.
Thank you, Councillor McElhaney.
Thank you.
Councillors, are there any speakers for this motion? Councillor Hooper.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I'm going to edit what I was going to read out a little bit. Some people have already covered the size of the city and that the fact that it's projected to be able to contain 4 city councils within its borders in 2036. 430,000 people is, well, let's have a look at the list. Ballarat, Port Phillip, Bayside, Cardinia. We keep going down the list. That each one of those cities has got a mayor and deputy mayor in its own right. Right? So if we're talking about coverage and respecting the views and capacity of our residents, we need to look to the future, not to the past, not to 1950. We need to start planning about what we want to do and build capacity and capability of this council going forward. Despite what is going on with the Local Government Act, we do not know what the legislation will look like in about 4 years' time, or even 2. But irrespective of that, the old Shire of Werribee and the city of Wyndham of today are very different places, transitioning from a small rural community to a 21st century smart city of tomorrow. This process that we're about to go through now allows us to say a clear message that what our community's expectations are of us as that smart city in respect to the laws being drafted by the state government and about what we're going to do in response to that consultation with the community. Ask them to participate in this process around the office of the mayor. In this proposal tonight, you'll see there are 2 distinct limbs, up to 2 deputy mayors, which has been covered at length, and transparency, a clear, transparent nomination process for the mayor. Residents throughout this city have said to me that they want greater transparency and for us to be forward thinking. So through this motion, you, residents, are asked to provide feedback, insight, to have a say. This is our city. And this motion gives you the power to have that comment, to talk about your expectations about the future of us. Sorry?
Excuse me.
January. That's all right, that's fine.
Councillor Hooper, please continue.
Thank you. It makes sense that during this transition phase that we've gone through, we examine how we operate as a council. The council itself has aligned with community expectations from the research conducted with the 2040 vision. Structurally, the organisation has transitioned itself, and with the support and courage of officers from across the organisation continues to do so in line with that vision. And page 23 of the Wyndham 2040 vision states, our city will be home to passionate residents who are always having conversations.
Wrap up, please. Your time's up.
I'll keep going just a minute.
You had 3 minutes, and that you know.
I was disrupted though.
Well, that's just the nature of the debate. So,
Well, surely it's reasonable to ask ourselves to go through the same process our staff have gone through. And that's why I commend this tonight.
Thank you,
Actually open
Councillor
ourselves up
Hooper.
for community.
Councillors, are there any further speakers against this motion?
Yes, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I also do not support Councillor Marcus's notice of motion tonight. There are many reasons for this, and some have already been covered by my other councillor colleagues speaking against this motion. I support all of the comments already made, and I won't be covering those points again. I am going to focus on the community engagement aspect of this motion, as it was one of my election platforms, and engaging in genuine community and feedback is very important to me, as it is to this community. We just voted on putting out our new community engagement framework to the community for consultation. In fact, we all did. It is stated in the report on page 55, it's there to encourage greater transparency and community participation in council decision making. I am surprised that we would be out seeking community feedback right before Christmas and during the holiday period. How does that create greater community participation? I'm not sure about others, but I'm generally pretty busy in the lead up to Christmas. Like me, people in our community are often away spending quality and important time with family and friends, time that is often hard to do during the year. The officer's commentary clearly states in the report on page 171 that community consultation during this practice is not seen as best practice, that council does not generally conduct community consultation at this time, given it extends into the New Year holiday period. We often discuss in briefings and in this chamber how important it is to genuinely hear what our community thinks. Starting consultation in the middle of December, in my opinion, is treating our community with disrespect. I truly don't understand why it has been decided to embark on this path. I haven't really heard one compelling reason yet as to why this is good for Wyndham. If it is about coverage and growth, maybe the question that needs to be asked is, do we actually have enough councillors to support our growing community in the years to come? While it is not currently a statutory role, in my opinion, the one deputy mayor model worked very well over the previous 12 months. I believe having two just starts to confuse things, particularly given we have a portfolio system in place. How does the delegation work then? I will be ensuring, with assistance from government, that if this change gets through, the two deputy mayor roles don't get confused with my democratically elected statutory councillor role. The reality is, not everyone around this table will be or should be a mayor or deputy mayor. That these positions are not about taking turns or having all wards represented. It's about the best and right people for the job. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Councillors, is there any further speakers for the motion? Any further speakers for the motion? Councillor Villa-Gonzalo. Thank you for speaking.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I support the notice of motion and the call for a review of our local law to allow for the election of two deputy mayors. Wyndham is one of the fastest growing cities in Australia, with a population projected to be 433,000 in 2036. We claim to be a smart city and have a national award to prove it. We claim to set the trend and lead, not follow. We developed the award-winning Wyndham 2040. We are implementing a social procurement policy when most other councils are not even talking about it. Earlier this year, we hosted GovHack and ConnectHack, and early next year, we will hold a digital innovation festival. We continue We continually seek new ways of doing things better, not resist change. Resisting because it hasn't been done before. We cannot hope to prepare for the challenges we will face in the next 20 years with the mentality and attitude of the 1990s. The challenges we are going to face in the near future, resulting from a fast-growing, diverse population, a fast-growing economy, fast-growing activity centers, including the long-awaited catalyst sites and the East Werribee Precinct project, will create a bigger demand for the mayor to represent council in events and in business and community meetings. The notice of motion is about strengthening the office of the mayor by providing an additional deputy mayor to support him or her. Yes, we have councillors responsible for portfolios who can ably represent council when the mayor is not available. Those who oppose the motion suggest that there is no need for a second deputy if a councillor can do the job. They suggest that those supporting the motion are interested only in having the title. Well, I have the title already and I am supporting the motion because it is the right thing to do for Windham. When a councillor represents the mayor at a community function as a deputy mayor, the title is an added benefit to the privilege of speaking in behalf of council. But the greater beneficiary is the organization hosting the event, who would feel the greater significance and importance the council plays on them and the role they play in our community. Because in the absence of the mayor, council is sending a deputy mayor. To some members of our community, it does not make a difference. But to others, especially members of our growing cultural diverse community, it makes a lot of difference. I should know, I was president and officer of several migrant associations in Windham and the western suburbs in the last 20 years. I have invited and welcomed the attendance of councillors, deputy mayors, and mayors during those times. It made a lot of difference to us. Mr. Mayor, we are going to face challenging times ahead, and tonight we have the opportunity to prepare the council and in particular the office of the mayor to become more responsive to those challenges. I support the motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gonzalo. Councillors, are there any further speakers against the motion? Any further speakers at all? Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I think I would be supporting this motion, and I have not been convinced why we not support this motion. I don't see any negativity or any reputational damage to this council having two deputy mayors. I think it's a great initiative put by a councillor who's got a lot of experience and have got been a deputy mayor and been a mayor and have been consulted a number of residents, obviously, and now put it forward for the two deputy mayors. I personally believe there's no cost to it. So the deputy mayor will get same salary as councillors get. Just make it clear. A lot of people might be thinking in a gallery or deputy mayor have a extra salary compared to the councillors. By the way, is the same role but different title. I also have spoken with the South Asian community, and they, because the city, as you said, that now on 27,000 Indian community, as we previously spoken about the Indian culture precinct, now their views, some of them, they believe two deputy mayor will benefit the community functions when they host the functions. And I know that now the cities have got more than 200,000 people. Now, Melbourne City Council's got 135,964. And that is what I'm trying to say here, reference to Melbourne City Council. We want to be innovative. We want to be progressive council. Now, the Harrison ward itself has 78,000 or more a resident, which is almost equivalent to the Hobson Bay City Council. So actually, in near future, you may be asked for the local government to actually make two city councils of Windham City, because we are growing the numbers every day here. 165 residents per week coming to city of Windham.
Councillor Khan, 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 65 or 90 babies born every week. Isn't that make a common sense? We can have a more representation, more leadership, and I totally agree with my colleagues. Josh Gulligan's view is about strengthening a mayor's office and officers' work, giving them an extra hand in making the city more stronger, thinking differently. And I personally believe is a 21st century's vision, and I totally agree with my fellow councillor Tony Hoople, which carries a vision and say that, look, think outside the box. We don't need to think 1989 or 1950. Now city had changed. Let's get real. Make it 2 deputy mayor. I will argue those ones not convinced. Please think outside the box. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Councillor, is there any further discussion on this matter? No further discussion. I put it to the vote.
No, I would like-
Oh, I beg your pardon, Councillor Marcus, you have a right of reply.
Thank you. I've been a councillor for 12 years. I've been in business for so many years. I've lived in the main street and I engage with people. So for people to say that we're not engaging, I'm very sorry. Everybody knows where I live in the main street and my door is open to absolutely everyone. And I have had a lot of people come to me and say, Heather, what a brilliant idea. I don't believe there's been any damage done to this council at all, full stop. Now, let's talk about the City of Casey. I have spoken to the Mayor, the present Mayor, and the 2 new Deputy Mayors of the City of Casey. This is the 3rd year that they have opted to have the 2 deputies. Councillor Amanda Stapleton advised me and sent us an email to advise she first opposed the idea when it came up 3 years ago. And the council voted in favour of the 2 deputies. She has advised she is now a convert and she believes it has provided so many more great benefits for the residents and the council. The Mayor and the other deputy also agreed and they are happy to continue with 2 deputies at Casey's. As you all know, we have many more wonderful cultures living in our city.
1 minute, Councillor Marcus.
Oh my God. Who love organising festivals. They delight in having the Mayor or the deputies. They hold the Mayor and the Deputy very, very highly. I was recently at a Muslim Senior Citizens Week and a male got up at the end of the evening and said, Councillor Marcus, I want to congratulate you. You have stayed with us all night and I bet you were bored silly, but you are been here not like many of the other councillors that go. I saw it at the Community Awards leave, I saw them at the Business Awards leaving, I saw them at the Fashion Awards leaving. It is very devastating when people go to the trouble of organising events.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. Relevance to actually the 2 deputy mayors or the strengthening office of the mayor, Councillor Marcus seems to be talking about herself in a councillor role, not actually in a titled role. I'd just like to understand the relevance of that point.
I am not talking that at all. I'm talking about what people have been telling me over the 2 deputies. Okay?
Relevant.
All right.
Then may I say, Councillor Marcus, you need to say that that's your opinion.
I'm relating, like everybody else around this chamber tonight has said about residents coming up to them. We've seen all the Facebook ones against us. Exactly right. So I believe the councillors speaking in favour of this notice of motion have explained in detail why we should be voting for the strengthening of the office of the Mayor and why we should be electing 2 deputy mayors. For goodness sake,
Councillor Marcus, your time's up.
Let's just give it a trial, and this is what the Casey councillor said. Don't knock it down, just give it a trial. Then if it does come in from the state government, we haven't lost anything.
Thank you very much.
Except a few $1,000.
Councillors, please vote clearly. All those in favour of the motion? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All those against?
Call the division, please.
Councillor Gilligan, who's conducting this meeting? Me? Thank you very much. If there's, I'll call for the division. Councillor Seen, we've got our hands up still. We'll do all those against. Councillor Shaw, Councillor Maynard, Councillor Barlow and Councillor McAloney. All those for the motion? Councillor Gilligan, Councillor Villigonzalo, Councillor Marcus, Councillor Ahn, Councillor Hooper and Councillor Khan. Thank you very much. It might be prudent at this point to councillors just to allude the fact for the public record that I've refrained from my commentary in this regard on our meeting procedures and I followed our meeting procedures and conventions. I did not intervene in any way, shape or form, and I look forward to the public comment that comes on this matter. Thank you, councillors. The matter is over. Councillors, the next item on the agenda is item 8, which is 8.1, awarding of contract C1896/17, supply of trees, planting and maintenance. The report is on page 172 to 178 with a recommendation on 173 with nil attachments. Councillors, can I have a mover, please?
Move.
Councillor Barlow, seconder, please. Councillor Hooper. A discussion, please, councillors.
Yep.
Councillor Barlow.
Sorry, I was polishing my coat. Mr. Mayor, thanks for the opportunity. This is just a straightforward operational issue about supplying of trees, planting and maintenance. All I ask is that when we do choose the trees, my personal view is that I would prefer indigenous species and not introduced. And so therefore I look forward to it. I drive down Heaths Road to go home to Wyndham Vale, of course, on a regular basis. Every time I leave Wyndham Vale, I have to drive back. And the trees that are growing within the drainage area there, the floodway, are really starting to kick off. And so all of those trees, they're going to look magnificent when they actually start to grow to their full height. So very supportive of this, but I am mindful of the fact that I would prefer indigenous species. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barlow. Councillor, are there any councillors wish to speak against this motion? Any further speakers for it? Councillor Gilligan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I just want to point out the point I made, I think it was 2 months ago, that it's fantastic to see us advancing in this space in relation to tree canopy when you have a country council, Ballarat City Council, where residents are essentially crying out for more trees to be placed in their municipality. I think we are absolutely eons ahead on this, and I can certainly agree with Councillor Barlow, particularly around the urban ecosystem that we're building. I think this is a great achievement, yet again, of a series of achievements of this council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gilligan. Councillors, any further discussion? Councillor Marcus.
Yes, I'm very happy to see the supply of trees and the awarding of this contract, because this fits in nicely to my portfolio, if I'm allowed to say my portfolio. It's very important. This city is 2 degrees hotter than the eastern suburbs. Well, you drive to the eastern suburbs and you have a look at the beautiful leafy trees. It is very difficult also that, and we have to be very careful of the species of trees that we do plant that fit into this city of ours. So to our manager, to the open space peoples to exercise the option to extend this contract for up to 2 years. Thank you very much. And please, everybody, just remember to plant an extra tree, because backyards can be 2 degrees cooler if you've got beautiful trees planted in them.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus. Councillors, any further discussion? Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I'm very passionate about the trees. Last term we planted trees, and I think they really have benefited everybody. A lot of community came along with it, and there was opportunity for community to do some work. And I think now it's good work to see that, we awarding contract 1.3 million for that company who's going to be supply trees for us. I wish there could be more variety of the trees, and we can have a more budget for the trees. Trees are really important. It changes outlook of your city, and it looks really good. Now you go in South Yarra and all that, and I love it when I see the trees like maple trees. I wish we could have more trees, could have a more budget for the trees, and we can sort of put more trees on the new development and make sure, we can encourage the developers to do it, and things like that will really it will really change the city's future. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Councillors, any further discussion? No further discussion. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. Item 8.2, awarding a contract C1898/17, construction of the Wyndham Aboriginal Community Centre and the Integrated Family Centre. Report is on page 179 to 186 with a recommendation on page 180. Attachments are printed in the confidential attachments, page 3 to 27. Councillors, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Khan, seconder, please. Councillor Barlow. Thank you. Councillor Khan. No comment? No. Councillors, any discussion against? Any further discussion? Councillor Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This community centre is going to be built in Wyndham Vale. It's not my patch, but I do live in Wyndham Vale. And can I say that I'm really, really happy to see that we're going to build a major community centre for the whole community there. It is called the Aboriginal Community Centre. The state government's put in a whole heap of money into this particular centre. There is going to be an Aboriginal hub component of it, and I believe that at some stage in the future we might even go out to community consultation to actually find a name for this community centre, and this is a working title, I think. Wyndham Vale badly needs this type of social infrastructure. There's going to be a whole range of services provided out of here for the whole community, and I believe it includes, and I stand to be corrected, a kindergarten facility as well, which we badly need those extra places. So I'm looking forward to it commencing, and I'm more looking forward to it being completed.
Thank you, Councillor Barlow. Councillor, any further discussion on this item? No further discussion. I'll put it to vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. Councillors, the next item on the agenda is a long one, and item 8.3, awarding of contract C1907/17, construction of the Williams Landing Reserve Sports Pavilion. The report is on page 187, 192. Recommendations on 188. There are no attachments. Councillors, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Hooper, seconder, please. Councillor Khan. Councillor Hooper? No? Councillor Khan? Oh, sorry. Are there any speakers against this motion? Are there any further speakers on this motion? Councillor Barlow.
Yes, well, yesterday we had the great pleasure in going to this particular site with the Minister for Local Government, allocating funding here from the Growing Suburbs Fund of $1.905 million towards this sporting precinct. Now, I'm not quite sure whether and you might be able to throw some light on this, Mr. Mayor, because you had the speech. I'm not quite sure whether that was towards just for construction of the pavilion, or it was as just part of the government, the state government giving us money through the Growing Suburbs Fund for the total area. But I was actually blown away with the fact of the number of tennis courts that were there, the high quality, extremely high quality of the cricket practice nets, which I don't think I've ever seen cricket practice nets like that, even at the MCG. I have watched cricketers warming up before test matches, and ours is going to put the MCG's practice wicket nets to shame, I think. Of course, the two ovals, and now we're going to start the construction of the sports pavilion, which I quite foolishly asked you yesterday, Mr. Mayor, whereabouts is the sports oval going to be, the sports pavilion going to be installed? And you said between the two football ovals. So it was interesting to see that, and I think this is absolutely and it was absolutely fantastic for the people of Williams Landing, and I'm quite sure that people will come from Truganina, from Point Cook, all to participate in the sports that it's going to provide. So I'm very happy to see that the local government minister came down, once again handed us over a big cheque.
Councillor Barlow.
Thank you. Finished.
Thank you, Councillor Barlow. Councillors, any further discussion? No further discussion. I'll put it to the vote. Please clearly raise your hands. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. Item 8.4, awarding of contract C1908/17 asphalt resheet works. The report's on page 193 to 197, with a recommendation on page 194 and nil attachments. Councillor, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Gillian, seconder, please. Councillor Hooper. Discussion, councillors. For or against? No discussion. I put it to vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. Moving right along. 8.5, awarding of contracts C1916/18, supply and delivery of a new dozer. The report's on page 198 to 205, with a recommendation on page 199 and nil attachments. Councillors, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Khan, seconder Councillor McElhaney. Any discussion, councillors?
Mr. Mayor, straightforward. Yes, can't say that better than this. I think we're getting the new Dodger, so machinery is important, keeping up to date. And yeah, I'm glad to see that, we're keeping up to date the new equipments and compliance. Yeah, this is important. So yeah, it's good to see that, that the equipment will be identified and compliant with the standards.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Councillors, any speakers against this motion? Any further speakers on the motion? No further speakers. I put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. We have to 8.6, awarding of contract C 1917/18, supply and delivery of a new compactor. The report's on page 206 to 212. Recommendations on page 207. No attachments. Councillors, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Gillian, seconder. Councillor McElhaney. Discussion, councillors? No discussion. I put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. Item 9, contract summary. There is nil. Item 10, questions with notice from the public gallery. Madam CEO, do we have any questions from the public gallery?
Mr. Mayor, we do have a number of questions this evening. So I'll start with a question received from Mr. Bala Ajampar. Is he in the gallery this evening? No, okay, we'll leave that one then. The next question is from Dr. Bro Sheffield Brotherton. So Bro, good evening. Thank you for your question. This question relates to an item considered by Council earlier regarding 2 deputy mayors, and the question relates to councillors' capacity for multitasking and identifying their priorities. It does relate to the recent trip to Barcelona, and the question is how many deputy mayors would need to travel to Barcelona to create a good impression. So I think we take that as being a commentary dressed up as a question. However, given that council still need to consult on the merits of the 2 deputy mayor model based on our local law process, at this time we don't have 2 deputy mayors. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Could be Jose and Jose B.
The final question this evening, Mr. Mayor, is from Mr. Strong, and Mr. Strong's in the gallery this evening, and this relates to the Barcelona trip and what's the anticipated financial return to Wyndham City Council from the $19,000 spent on sending the delegation to Barcelona, and what were the key performance indicators used to justify the trip? So firstly, as we've reported widely through our own sort of networks via social and also through media releases, the trip to Barcelona was really part of Council's broader economic development strategy. It's around positioning Wyndham as a leader, promoting the opportunity to partner with organisations that local government wouldn't necessarily have the opportunity to do if it didn't have a flagship project like we have as part of our Winland Smart City work. So in terms of the financial payback to council, we don't have detailed KPIs as such, but in our city plan, we're very committed to economic development or inbound investment as a result of some of the work that we're doing in smart city space and also broadly in economic development. So whilst we haven't got an actual dollar figure we can put on that at this time, there's no doubt that over the next 12 months we will start to see, some benefits emerging from the smart cities work council's doing generally, and specifically around the trip to Barcelona and any other future participation in congresses and opportunities such as this to really demonstrate the value of investing in jobs around the tech industry in Wyndham more specifically. So it's about building that credibility in that space, Mr. Mayor. So I'm happy to provide that response to you in writing to Mr. Strong.
No further questions, Madam CEO?
No, I think that's it, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam CEO. Councillors, the next item on the agenda is item 11, Council Delegates Reports. The reports commence on page 213 to 214, recommendation on 214, attachments on 215 to 218. Councillors, I will ask for... Sorry, I missed one question. I think they're just giving it to me. Okay.
Sorry.
We will just hold that for a second, councillors.
Mr Mayor, sorry about that. What's happened is I didn't have a copy of this question in front of me, so I do apologise. And again, it's a question from Bill Strong. So, Mr Mayor, if you're happy for me to put this question, and then I will provide Stephen with his paper back, because it's got the response. So sorry again for that, Mr Strong. So this question relates to, assuming that this motion is passed, and this relates to the motion concerning Chermside Park and the re-establishment of the grandstand. So assuming that this motion is passed, what will the penalty imposed on the applicant be if the amended condition at para 19C is not complied with, i.e. the grandstand's not completed by the 30th of June 2018? And I will just hand that back now to Stephen Thorpe to respond to. And again, that's something we can provide in writing to you.
Through you, Mr Mayor, thank you again, Mr Strong, for the question. So there are a number of different penalties that may apply depending on the breach that has occurred. These include issuing a planning infringement notice, an enforcement order being sought from VCAT, which could either be by council or any other affected party, and prosecution may proceed in the magistrates court. In terms of actual penalties, they vary from about $1,585 through to $190,300. And enforcement proceedings may include not only a penalty but also measures taken to resolve whatever the issue is. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We do actually have another question that wasn't included. So again, my apologies. Normally we don't have this sort of disarray with question time, but I apologise for that. This question's from Ian McGowan. Is Ian in the gallery this evening? Hi, Ian. So the first question is, how much is Wyndham City Council investing to provide parking as part of the Werribee City Centre redevelopment? And the second question is, how many jobs are expected to be based in the Werribee City Centre redevelopment area once complete? I'll hand over to our Director, Kate Roffey, to respond to that. Thanks, Kate.
Mr Mayor, should I leave the council chamber for the answering of this question?
No, that's fine. Thank you, Madam CEO. Ian, thanks for the question. I'm assuming that you're referring to the catalyst sites that are under development at the moment. Unfortunately, they're commercial in confidence, so we haven't signed the contracts with the developers as yet around costing, so we can't provide that detail in terms of what we will be contributing as council to those car parking developments. What I can assure you is that the car parks that are lost at grade as the 4 sites are developed will be replaced in those buildings as they go up. And you'll also note as you drive down the city centre area at the moment, the West End car park with the old Toyota site there is being redeveloped as a car park at this point in time, so that they will replace car parks that are lost as the sites go up. And the Cherry Street car park as well, which is at the other end of the city, will also receive some upgrades in terms of lighting, so that it's commensurate with the West End car park. That's being done to make sure that we continue to have the same number of parks in the city centre, in and around the city centre, as those sites go up. Just out of interest, I can tell you that there are 5,004 parking spaces in the city centre at this time, and there's 1,144 parking spaces on the other side near the train station. So I think we have plenty in the city centre area at this point in time.
Through you, Mr Mayor, the follow-up question was just in regards to jobs and attraction of employment into the city.
Same, we don't at this point in time have clear details as yet on what the tenancy of those buildings will be. That'll be developed as we go through and finalise those contracts. You've obviously read some information in our local newspaper around proposals that will go into each of those developments, but that is yet to go through council in a town planning formal sense. So again, we can't comment on that at this point in time.
Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Madam CEO. So, item 11, as I alluded to before, Councillor Delegates reports, page 213 to 214, recommendation on page 214, attachments 215 to 218, and as has been current practice, we will I will seek a mover and a seconder, and then once we've voted, then we comment on the delegates' report. So I'll continue along that line. So, councillors, can I have a mover, please, of this? Councillor Khan, a seconder. Councillor Ahn. Councillors, all those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. And those delegates' reports, if those councillors wish to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. I'm giving time for 21st of August 2017. We did our meeting as we do normally, part of the portfolios, and one of that member, Heather, she resigned from the committee. So we'll be seeking now another member in the near future, or thinking how we can get another member on the committee. Now we've discussed a number of plans. We finalised our draft work plan for the upcoming years, and we did discuss about how we can increase business and community hub concepts, trying the different ideas, enterprise street model, and these sort of discussions we had. Now this thing just to be in a sort of as a working document, so I would be now reporting in next year on some of the items we have got on the work plan. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Any further speak to Councillor Marcus?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Environment and Sustainability Portfolio Committee, we just considered the following items at the last one, which was the Boulevard Plans, an update on the City Forest and Habitat Strategy, Healthy Water Refresh, the Werribee Catchments Collaborations, Coastal Strategy Update and Workshop, War on Waste Update and Workshop, and Green Living Series. We are involving the schools in the Green Living Series, and War on Waste, if you have noticed, is back on Channel 2 on a Sunday night, and he's very, very good, the way he gets stuck into the politicians about they're not looking at plastic bags as such. We're not quite sure what that will be, but the War on Waste, we will be doing the big plastic ball that he rolls around up to Parliament House, and it will be done by one of our larger schools, and to make sure that we get people to really get on board with not with the plastic bags. And we want people not to be using takeaway coffee cups, but to take their own coffee cups into the coffee shops and that, because there is somebody now in Ballarat that can segregate the plastic from the actual cardboard, but we just need to make sure that we help everyone and encourage all of our residents out there to come on board to make sure that we don't have this waste and litter in our streets. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus. I believe that's all the delegates' reports. Councillors, just to, in the event, it's 10:15. Our standing orders are for a 10:30 finish. Could I please have a councillor, in the event that we go over 10:30, move please for an extension of time of half an hour?
Yeah.
Councillor Khan, seconder. Councillor Gilligan. Discussion? No discussion. All those in favour? Against? Motion is carried. Thank you. Okay. Item 12, urgent business. There is nil. Confidential business. Councillors, can I have a mover, please?
I'd like to move a motion.
Khan.
I'd like to move a motion, Mr. Mayor. The pursuant to the Section 89(2) of the Local Government Act 1989, the standing orders to be suspended in this meeting of the Council be closed to the members of the public in order of the Council to discuss.
Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Ahn, seconder. Councillor Villan-Gonzalo. Any discussion, councillors? All those in favour? The motion is carried. June 20.
Are we finished on time?
Well, I